I think that's
And everything else stays the same.
on the web.
On the
So,
wall, yeah.
we'll get it worked out.
Their live data. Yeah, because, it was everywhere else.
Right.
This is just.
And he doesn't think it's a big deal. It's just the web apps or the config web's not reading it.
There are zeros or G's, those are, or no O's or G's, those are zeros and sixes. Okay.
Sure, yeah.
The only person
You
having
got
that
very good
conversation.
hearing.
I do. Batching too long not to hear excellent things.
Once we could tie that to the linear referencing system and kind of check.
I think that's a lot of effort.
You would like to
I mean. They look great, and then after
I would be
things
able
will
to.
scan.
Oh, the jazz side thing?
Handle that.
Each table, you have one right there next to you, has a sign-in sheet. Someone would please sign in for us.
I don't know if that would.
And make sure to put your email on there, just in case you want something I'm going to be talking about a little later. I'll be emailing it out. I think we're very close to everybody we were expecting, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of get rolling here. For those I have not yet met in person, I am Massey. I'm the CS coordinator here in Dickinson County, and I am a member of the subcommittee, the GS committee that has been working on these standards. And if you see any typos or anything like that in this document, they are all my fault, because I'm the one that has been putting it together. So we're going to do just a couple of housekeeping things. Pull this out of our way. A couple of housekeeping things. We are here from 10 to 2. That's the plan. We're going to be here around 11:30. You guys are going to have pizza from our local French bread pizza shop, and they'll be bringing some stuff in. So, questions welcome anytime as we go through this. Don't feel at all about stopping me and asking me to go over something in more detail. There's a lot in here, and I am familiar enough with it that I just blow by something thinking, well, everybody knows that. And that isn't actually the case, so please feel free to do that. Lunch buddy, I'm sorry this did not go in an email, but it is $5. So when you get around to it, if you could drop 5, that's awesome. And if you can't, that was kind of my bad for not letting everybody know. So,
You're a Randall.
I know. I'll set this down over here. There you go, yeah, there is that. What you have in front of you is version 7, draft version 7 of the standards document. And for those people that are on the phone, it has some changes from version 6. So if you've got version 6, then you'll be able to see, I'll be showing on the screen the document itself as we get into talking about it. So don't worry too much that you don't have it. You will be able to see what we're referring to. We're actually going to start with a very basic primer on Next-Gen 911, partially because for a time a lot of this was really fuzzy to me. I understood, because people told me so, that IS was very, very important to Next-Gen 911, critical. I wouldn't work without it. I knew all those things. But I did not understand exactly how it tied in. Some of you don't have to necessarily worry about that, but this is just a view, and I think it will be helpful as you're looking at things going forward. So before we get into anything with the standards or the MSAT document or anything else, we're just going to do a really brief primer on Next-Gen. So now, in E911, which is what we have now, when a call is placed, it goes to a selective router. This is where that is sitting with a phone company. That router checks against the MSAG to pick the PSAP that the call is routed to and pick up the ALI information that's going to get attached to the call. Before a phone line is put in, a landline phone is put in, query that same MSAG to make sure that phone line is going to be at an address that hits appropriately in a 911 call. So, set up. the setup essentially isn't changing. Only now call is placed, and instead of a selective router, hit a network called the EZNet. EZNet is going to have information in it coming from this GIS data that we are putting together now. That is what it is going to test against to figure out what PSAP to route it to. And additional information, not just ALI, but a whole bunch of other additional information will be possible that's attached to the call. A landline phone or any other communications device attached to an address is actually hooked up. They'll be checking against that GIS data to see if the address or proposed address is accurate. So next gen, I've stolen these slides from Nina. There was look at the bottom. But basically, E911 cannot handle a whole bunch of the new technology and communication services very well, particularly texting, image, videos, anything that has to come across a network. Now, it is a major deal if a PSAP goes down to move everything over to another PSAP. They have to have a good bit of hardware. They have to have a lot in place. Again, this is a much easier process. A computer should be able to, the biggest bit of hardware that you have to have, in a pinch anyway. Improve interoperability and information sharing, because right now, 911 is its own animal. All the technology involved with 911 is very proprietary. It is very different than anything else. The signals that are coming across are very, very unique to the system. And what is coming is going to be something that's far more like all the other internet traffic that's out there, which means you have a broader base of software that can use it, databases that can add data to it, things like that. It's different because it is packet-based. It is network traffic than circuit switched like phone systems. We'll have to replicate E911 because this is a transitional process, but it also has to add new capabilities. It will GS as a base instead of that tabular MSAG. It's longer a local service, meaning that a lot of interoperability, a lot of the pieces of 911 will be able to happen on not just a county or a city, but a state, even national level. GS, turn the lights down for you. There you go. So your database, we're working with data to populate that database. It provisions, or essentially copies the data out to two functions within Gen 911. The L for the location validation function, and the ECRF, or emergency call routing function. And Scott, if I mess any of this up, feel free to.
You're doing great so far.
Awesome. So we're at the location validation function. The location validation function, the place that the service provider, usually a phone company, but not always, is going to check against to make sure the address is good when they install a new phone. The VoIP user sets the system up to say, when I call 911, this is what I mean. Or testing records that currently exist in their system to make sure those addresses are valid. Request to the location validation function, and it says, yep, that's cool. It's in centerline file. It's in my address points. Or no, it's cool. You need something before you do this installation or accept this address. The GI database, we constantly updating the location validation function. And our request is hidden over here, but the terminology you may have heard quite a bit of is provisioning with the SIF, or provisioning through the SIF. That is the spatial interface function, and all that means essentially is that database is constantly pumping in changes that come into it down to LVS. Don't worry about the technology in the middle, fortunately. That's another committee. So, Gen 911 call, someone dials 911. You can tell there's a dispatcher because he's angry. Not help. But they call it and it hits the EZNet. A whole bunch happens in there. If I tried to make a slide for that, it would look like a ping pong ball moving around. But all we have to know about from the GIS side is the ECRF, or emergency call routing function. Call comes back to the PSAP. What does the ECRF look like? similar to the location validation function. You start with a database that we are working on. It, again, provisioning through SIF, is constantly updating emergency call routing. The call comes in, and the ECF does two things that are happening right now with the MTAG. First, it will the call to the right PSAP. Second, it attaches information to the call. Use information being police, fire, EMS, and maybe who owns the phone. You have a whole lot of ideas about what's going to go in there. Everything from pre-plans for fire attack on high-rise buildings to the tier reporting for chemicals to other emergency management style information. The thing to understand about all that additional call information, though, is that every single bit of it will be tied in some way to the GIS data. The only way that the call is going to get that information attached is if GIS data is correct. The address verifies against the center line or the address points, and if the polygons have been created to tell it exactly which jurisdiction it's sitting in. That is actually it. GIS does, but that's everything GIS does within this. The fact of it is, you can't route emergency calls without GIS data that is both current and accurate in that system. So any on the floor here have any questions about that? Was that pretty clear? Did that help you understand a little bit of what's going on?
Sure, you want the two words from VoIP phones at this
There are a few of them, but yeah, please.
We had a Vonage customer that lived in Overland Park, moved to Kent, Washington, a medical emergency, dialed 911. They did not update their record through the VoIP provider, so they got us.
Yeah. We had as well with a young woman who had her own phone while she was at home. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh.
So we took fire in Commerce, California, that's covered by the LA County Fire Department, because a business in Soto just recently upgraded their VoIP system, and their VoIP provider didn't quite get it done right, so they dialed 911 and got us.
And that aren't really familiar with voice over.
Yeah, they're still on the way. We think they're in Nevada right now.
For those really familiar with voice over IP and how that works with 911, basically, just like any other service that you get, you go through and enter all of your user information, you know, your name, your email address, your credit card number, whatever. One of those things is, and where should we send your 911 calls? What should we say? If you forget to update that, like our story of a young lady who had her own VoIP service here and then went off to college in New Hampshire, dialed 911 and got us. If you don't update that, it's going to continue routing your call the old way. And something that's important to understand with NextGen that a lot of people think that NextGen's going to solve this. It's not. It has an impact on that. VoIP is still going to be human-driven. They're still going to have to put an address in there. Nobody will be able to magically figure out what computer you're calling from and what house it's at. We'd like to
figure out a way to do that. VoIP is going to be easy.
Yeah.
Because relying on people that update their own information, nobody thinks they're going to call 911.
Yeah.
So there's really no need to change that until you need to call 911.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah, how would a person check to make sure they have the right?
they need to get with their provider, Vonage or whoever's providing their VoIP service, and they can probably see it on a configuration screen somewhere, but I would call the provider and check to be sure. So, Awesome. So let us on then to the burning question for a lot of people we have discovered, and that is MTAG remediation. MTAG remediation is something that has come up quite a lot. There's been some confusion even within our committee about if it was going to get covered. It is a large expense. It is a large problem for those of you that are familiar with it. It is necessary in order to get the center line correct. There could be records in that MTAG that aren't in your center line. You need to know that. and you need to get that corrected, one or the other. But it is a big deal, and we're not 100% sure how it's gonna get handled yet. So, and I'm inviting someone else, but Ken, please correct me if I'm saying this incorrectly. First, we are going to get more detailed, error reports from, detailed error reports more in line with what actually, is in the standard that you might have read to look and compare. So we are going to be getting those. We don't have immediate time frame, we're still working that out, but it's going to be fairly soon. Is that a reasonable thing to say, Jessica?
Yes.
Okay. Then we are going to ask the remediation vendors with written proposal to sell us your estimate for MSAG remediation. Because we have a whole lot to consider with this for, of course. So we'd like you to list that separately on each of the bids. So, you know, give us the actual layers, each data layer. MSAG needs to be separate and on its own. Your estimate for that.
I think it's a mute issue. I think they're not muted.
I think so. There were quite a few questions that have come up over the last several days via email and in person at Magic and over about MSAG remediation. I'd love to tell you we have it all worked out. As you all know, this process is going forward pretty quickly, and that is what we have right at the moment. Now, we do have a couple slides from Mark. Mark Whalen through, I'm pointing to you now.
Yeah, which Mark? There's two Marks, you know.
Yeah.
There's regional council, then there's me.
But Mark Whalen gave us a couple of slides of some of the full errors, and just an idea of the comparisons and his thoughts on what needs to happen with the MSAG record and how it needs to get changed. But his experience, no different than any of yours who have looked at this data, was that you need more complete two-sided reports to be able to truly figure out what's wrong and what's right.
Did generate this report, or did AOS generate this report?
AOS generated columns 1 and 2, and you generated column 3, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Hi. Yes.
On this report, I mean, for AOL, are you checking all potential address ranges between 1 and 941, or are you just checking 100 and 941?
What I did on this, I brought up Google Maps, and I hate Google Maps, so I could get an aerial shot. Avenue in Kingman does in the 100 block, and it ends in the 900 block. So the block in the that came from is, let me, here's, the M covers the actuals from the 941. Center line runs to 999 east. Whether it actually runs that far enough, I don't know. Something's a little bit out of whack.
We're still kind of wondering exactly how those tests are going to come out for the new reports. I don't know that they can reasonably answer right now exactly how they're testing it, because we still have to look at that, but we will let you know how that happens, and we will give you the information. Other questions about that? Let me flip to another slide with another set of examples for you guys to kind of look at.
Gary, I do have one question for you. If you're self-remediating, if a PSAP is self-remediating, then they would have vendors send a bid in, and wanted a vendor to take care of the MSAG remediation. Then the vendor would send just that portion of it into the committee?
The PSAP in that instance, I'm presuming, should contact the vendor and let them know that that's the aspect of it they want them to remediate. And then, yeah, the vendor would prepare that part of the bid. Is that fair?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Speaking of self-remediating, so to speak, this is gonna be a big job. And the more outline, obviously, your MSAG is, the bigger job this is gonna be. And we don't have all the particulars of how it's gonna happen yet. We are working with AT&T, try and develop a good workflow that will make things a little easier than maybe they have been historically to put some changes into them, but that is not complete yet. So everything I'm talking about with MSAG, I'm talking about what we want to do, what we're trying to do, but what we are not complete with. We will communicate that back out to you as soon as we have things solid, both with AOS and with AT&T. But for right now, that's what we've got. Does that address your questions? Does that address your questions?
You may, if you're gonna go into this in more detail, you can stop me. But your MSAG and your street center line, I guess, at like 39 and the other may go to 99.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying you're gonna be dropping those to 39 if that's the last?
This is one of those things that has to be discussed. Mark and I were just talking about this because there are actually two different philosophies. Nina's philosophy is actually different than the one that Mark puts up here. Neither philosophy is required. So I think it's something that we're going to have to sit down and discuss about as best, and something you're going to have to figure out what is best for your agency. I know, for example, in my county, that trying to trim the MSAG back to the existing centerline addresses or the actual addresses would seriously increase my time, because every SAG record in our county was done to theoretical address ranges. It's worth the man hours for me to remediate that. And it doesn't help me enough to make it worth that time. But that is my decision for Dixon County that I will be discussing with our 911 director. You know, I think that's something that you're going to have to go forward with. Now, there are very reasons to do it either way, I think. And I think Mark's reason, as he explained it to me, and you're one to actually like of going kind of the other direction, is a very good one.
Yeah, what we do in the Mark region, I take care of everything in Johnson and Miami County. In the more rural areas of both counties, we run the hypotheticals, so you'll see an MSAG, it's like 3,900 to 151.99 as long as the street's in a straight line. When we get into the cities, we tend to break down MSAG into the actual with the low and then the actual high in the MSAG. And if the MSAG is higher than our last possible address, we back it up to that last actual, so there's no chance of AT&T or some other phone provider give customer service for an address that really isn't in existence. Our problem areas are our numbered streets, where we have a street, terrace, place, court, where the ranges are a little bit different, and if they hit on the wrong range, they could put them on the wrong street if we don't have it backed up to the actual highs and lows.
That's why I say that I think this is going to be somewhat unique to the organization, somewhat unique to your jurisdiction. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all for the MSAG. I don't think there has been, and I don't think there ever will be. We can come as close as we can within this guidance, within the guidance that we put out, but I think to some degree you're going to have to look at it yourself. It is certainly not worth hundreds of hours of staff time to change your philosophy if what currently is working. You know what I'm saying?
Are you going to provide a suggested way? I mean, you're going to have a preference, preferred way you
I don't know.
feel is best?
I would say that within everything we have right now, Nina's standard is there, but I would say if you have a situation like he's talking about, that's probably recommended standard. I mean, I really think this is going to have to be a local decision.
In what you're describing, so in this, like, cities, does every road segment then have its own record in the MSAG with the actual, or if they're strung together,
If
and you
they're-
still have,
Yeah, if they're strung together, we'll go with the low and the
and
high.
then the
for that.
highest, and
Yeah.
okay,
So,
that's
like,
the only thing that I was kind of wondering about. So, even though one block would maybe end at 100 to 140,
right.
you could string it until that road ended at 5:40.
Right, correct. Yes, that's how we have it set up. We go, on the MSAG point to point, and if there's break and it starts up again, that's a separate MSAG list.
Okay. I was just kinda wondering, since technically it wasn't like going into that 100 range, if you had to break every segment into a separate record on the MSAG, or if you still strung them together.
No, we check, quarterly, Mark checks everything against the center line compared to the MSAG, and so
Okay.
if somebody sneaks something in on us, it falls out, then we'll catch it there.
Okay. That's good to know, 'cause I'm probably run into one piece out.
Go right ahead.
So with all being said, are you saying they may not match, or the MSAG and the center line?
The MSAG and the center line, it is entirely possible, one of them could be actual address range, and the other one could be potential.
I just
One
want to verify that
99 and the other
we
one
didn't
is the
have to
35.
choose one of the two if,
This is up to you locally. I really think, are you guys comfortable with me throwing that out there? I think that's a local thing.
Yeah, I think it's whatever PSAP, whatever model they currently run. I think the idea is that they're updated along with this process to reflect the changes that are made in the GIS.
Right, I don't think
Not
it's,
doing
we're not telling you how to do your MSAG. We're trying to get you to look at your SAG and make sure that between it and the center line, there's nothing missing and nothing inaccurate.
So basically, whatever method is chosen, it needs to be reflected in both the center line and the MSAG,
It can be different in the
so
two.
it can still be different.
They can be different.
I guess on the center line compared to the MSAG, our law enforcement guys, when they go out on traffic stops, they'll say, I'm out on traffic 100 block of South Main.
Right.
Okay, well, there is no 100 South Main. Main Street starts at 103, for example.
Right.
So center line will start at 100 because of the hypothetical. We can always start the center line at 100 just because of what law enforcement does, and then we'll stop at the actual high. But your MSAC might start at 103 and then be higher from that, because that's an actual first lit address for that street.
If you're looking for direction, I would suggest two things. First of all, it has a document about synchronizing the SAG and the center line. You'll be receiving error reports that are in line with what comes out of that document, so I would recommend that you look at it and see what it says to do from there. The other thing I would say is, if you feel that Nina's recommendation is not appropriate or it is not in line with what you're doing, then you can give our subcommittee a call. We will put you in touch with somebody who is doing an MSAG similar to what you're messing with, and we will do our best to give you some support with that. The support we can give is, of course, philosophical. You know, this is how we have chosen to look at it. This is how we have chosen to handle it. So, but I first point you to that Nina document always. Yeah.
This is Sarah Lynn. Just a couple of things to chime in. One, whichever way you choose, just make sure you're consistent throughout. And as Sherry mentioned, the NINA document is very helpful, and it also provides information as far as on street type and just kind of different rules to follow. The other thing is, example, you may have multiple segments on your map, one entry in an MSAG. We often find that if it's 9 counties and 120 cities, it's done several different ways. We try to be as flexible as possible. As long as the data fits within the provider's database, it works in your CAD system, and it makes sense to the call takers answering the phone. So, you know, as Sherry said, there's not a one-size-fits-all here, but I think we would want to, you know, just caution you, if you try to go something way far different than what anyone else is doing, you may want to talk that through with somebody first, just to make sure you fully understand kind of what the implications are.
It is important to remember that the primary implication is not something that you may be dealing with sitting in your office. Because whatever you do to this MSAG is going to affect what that call taker gets on their alley dump from that call. So when 111 rings, what you do to this MSAG is going to affect what they receive. So please be sure that you have communicated, if you are a GIS person or you're a vendor, that is outside that 911 atmosphere, make sure that you've confirmed things are gonna work with their software, that you've had conversation with the dispatchers and possibly with the vendor of their software as well, if you're choosing to change how things are currently set up. Any question?
The way I did it before for checking the accuracy of the MSAG, was the main thing you're looking at is to make sure that you don't orphan any telephone numbers when you
Yes.
switch from the MSAG call routing to the GIS call routing.
Yes.
So, when we did it in Tennessee, they didn't wanna have all 100 districts have to go in and adjust the ranges in their MSAG if they didn't want to. So, the test that we did was just the telephone numbers, the alley database up to the center lines. If they all existed and they all found the right name and the address range and everything, then that meant that if they got rid of the MSAG today and switched over, that you wouldn't have orphaned records.
And that is a very fair assessment, I think, because that is the major concern here when the whole thing is over. I don't want to confuse everybody with it, but the real of the matter is when all of this changes, when 911 and that selective router and the MSAG are gone, and everything has to, that center line file, everything has that GIS data, we don't want phone numbers out there that can't, because it's Green Space Berg instead of Greensburg in the community name, and that person can't get a 911 call through. And AT&T or whatever your database provider is, gonna have to clean all of those up. So the big thing is the TN check. I would agree with that completely, and we're doing that.
Why are we checking the MSAG then? We could just check the TN against the center line, why do we want to?
Okay, I would love to be able to, but this is a fluid situation. If we're TNs, why are we bothering to remediate the inside?
Well, this is Sarah Lynn. There are a couple of reasons, and it can go versa. Some people ask out, oh, sorry, I'm echoing on myself, so I hope I sound okay on your end. So, in some cases, one correction to the MSAG can clean up numerous customer records. Or if you're looking at individual customer records, you may have to make corrections to individual customer records that wouldn't affect an MSAG. For instance, if a house number is wrong, that wouldn't necessarily affect the MSAG if that range is included in it, but it would absolutely correct an individual customer record. We had a situation where we had an MSAG listing, but we realized that there were two streets with the same name but had different types. So there were two, lines, but one was street and one was avenue, but they were all lumped into one under street. When we, did the comparison and started looking at it closer, we realized, wait, we need a second MSAG, and we need to determine which of these individual customers are on street and who's on avenue, because of course they happen to have, same house numbers. So in some cases, or if you have one listing that's in error, and it is, as an example, the directional is missing, say north is missing off the map, but there is north for on the MSAG, saying, correcting map to have north would essentially clean up all of the records that errored out.
The bottom line is partially, and this is the main thing that I think of looking at the MSAG, that I'm a little concerned that phone numbers have been assigned to things I don't have in my centerline file. If they have called 911 yet, I may not have any way to know that that's happened. We are all familiar with the idea that subordinate entities assign addresses that maybe we aren't familiar with. So I think one of the big things with checking the MSAG is just making sure that everything in the MSAG is in the centerline file, or everything that is appropriate in the MSAG is in the centerline file. It's probably a bigger question.
Mark, you can chime in on this because you've done a lot of work on it for us, but we've had so many situations. It's not just actual phones, and oftentimes if a customer has a phone line, even though there's not a phone on the other end, but a certain type of phone line, there'll be a record in the database. It may be an alarm on a bridge that indicates, water maybe railroad crossing, it may be, KDOT having some sort of, crossing, and, sometimes engineers just make up addresses. It had to go through and try to determine appropriate addresses for some of those, or try to figure out something else. In some cases, we can't figure out an address. There's no actual phone on the other end, but because of the way that it's coded, it's in the database, and therefore, have to either, we've come up with a list. Here are addresses that we can't figure out, and so then quarterly, when we do these, comparisons, we know that, you know what, this address is still on there, rather than having to, research it each time. But Mark, you could probably chime in on that. But
Yeah, it's engineering type, sorry, Kyle. And some of the phone providers, when they install new equipment, with multiple phone lines, they will at times assign what they think the address should be. We just went through a big project, and AT&T latitude, longitude, every piece of equipment that was falling out address-wise in the centerline database, and I reassigned the addresses to the existing centerline, and where applicable, we dropped address points in our database system. Another good example is City of Lenexa, not quite thinking as clearly as they should. That was the fire guys. They install alarm systems on the bridges, or not the tunnels, on I-35 around 87th Street. They made it up, we're so far off that we would not be able to dispatch to the automatic fire alarms that we received in the tunnels. So we had to go back and readdress those and get those updated in the database. But it's a constant battle, making sure that the addresses in the data set are correct and accurate. We like that all the time. That's a big part of what I do.
Well, and the reality is that I can't speak for CenturyLink because I don't use them, but AT&T will go and put things in our MSAG without alerting us that it's happened. They have something that's been assigned by someone they consider to be a credible source, or we have 1 to 49 as an address range, and they get a 501. Sometimes they will go in and add that as a single address MSAG without alerting us. So it'd be that our centerline file is missing something that's out there that we wouldn't know about unless we check the centerline, or unless we check the MSAG. So, I mean, the T is a very important check. It is going to make most of the stuff wash out. It is the purpose for it, but I do think that going back and remediating against the MSAG does have some value. It is just a very, very large project, and again, it's a very fluid situation. We do not have everything figured out yet. All we can say for certain is that we are going to get you guys more detailed reports to be able to look at, and the best recommendations that we can, and for how to do it, we point you to need a document as a starting spot.
And I'm just thinking, just from what I'm reading and know, even though we're moving towards next gen 911, I think the MSAC is going to be around well after next gen 911's up and running.
My conversation with Phil Ryan with AT&T, and he'll probably go, why did you say that out loud? But he expects at least 8 to 10 years that he'll still be messing with the MSAC. So we're not talking about something that's about to drop off.
Sarah Lynn, would you agree with the time frame, you think?
yeah, it really would. And that it is, even though the MSAG will go away, really, the way it is, really, the databases will marry. I kind of joke and say the two shall become one. The MSAG will more absorb into the map data, but you'll always still have to have some sort of tabular listing, spreadsheet or something of what are the streets in your city, in different jurisdictions, how are they broken down, I just don't, and then, what emergency responders go to, what's the appropriate street name and type. I personally don't ever see it completely go away. I think it'll just change into something different.
Certainly fair. The location validation function, it is going to perform that same thing that the MSAG is, and it's going to test it essentially in the same way. I mean, so. Is any other questions? Now, sorry, somebody on the phone is kind of talking back at us, and I keep thinking I'm speaking over you. So as I'm trying to ask a question? Okay. Yes.
If the range may match, but the ESN doesn't,
Yes.
or what about telephone exchange?
I don't think we're gonna probably go as detailed as telephone exchange because it is not an attribute that we track in any of the GIS data going forward. And does that mean you can't fix it? No, please consider it, but it's not gonna be in the error list and it's not gonna be anything that flags a problem for us. That's kind of the phone company's concern.
Yeah, about that, Sherry, we had, down in South Johnson County, had a Gardner, they assigned a Gardner Exchange phone number in the Edgerton Exchange area.
Right.
So, made contact with Century, think, do I need to split this MSAG out on the, are you the COs or what are we doing here? And they said, oh, no, it's okay, you can leave it like it is, because the way we're getting so fluid now, sometimes the CO office stuff really isn't that important anymore.
Right. Yeah, I think we're gonna focus on the MSAG community name, the address range, the street name, and the ESN. And those things, if you have taken much of a look at the data model, those things are all also attributes of every address point and street line segment. So those are important things to test for that very reason. You're gonna have to populate those fields eventually anyway.
Say those again.
The actual street, the street name, the address range, the MSAG community,
MSAG community.
and the ESN. Do you think of anything I'm forgetting? I think that.
Well, you said the range, but then earlier you talked about the range didn't have to match between the center lines and
The way Nina writes it, the range in your center line has to fit within the range in your MSAG. The way the Mark region does it, or at least the way Mark handles it there, and I think Sarah Lynn, has said the same thing, is they actually go the other direction and they say the MSAG range has to fit within the range that exists in their center line. So what we're looking at is the two have some relationship to each other that is valid and valuable. Or is one of them putting addresses hundreds of spaces away from where the other one has any reference? You know what I'm saying?
I guess another good example of that, City of Mission, 53rd Street and 53rd Terrace. 53rd Street runs all the way through 5500 to stop in the 7000 block. 53rd Terrace starts and stops, array the MSAG for both streets, ran city limit to city limit. And when we're breaking down the MSAGs, you would not believe the number of telephone listings that showed on 53rd Terrace that were really on 53rd Street, because Terrace didn't exist in that 100 block, and when the information was added to the 911 database, due diligence wasn't done, and they added it to the wrong street. And so that's why we really narrowed it down and care of that.
Just to make kind of my point clear, and I certainly don't speak for the whole committee on this, but I'm going to use the pointer so that everybody can see it. The top record here, where it says 10,000 to 9535, and the MSAG says 8,000 to 21,113, that is inappropriate. It's not going to be cool. Know what you do. You can add something on the street center line that will not hit the MSAG. You can enter something on the MSAG that will not hit the center line. That's not nice. You come on down here to this one. You have 4,000 to 5527, 4,000 to 5999. I'm assuming by looking at this, there is a 59, or not a 5900, but a 5,000 block. If there's a 5,000 block and the last real address is 5527, then it's cool. That's 5999. If that is a 100 block, that range is too long. It's, addresses that can hit on the MSAG that won't get anywhere near a center line. Does that make sense? Does that help clear that up a little bit?
You could have a 4098.
Yeah.
Really not.
Yeah.
You don't really go that high.
Sure, absolutely. The point is, don't have a whole lot of room in one that isn't in the other. But again, this is about what local need is. This is about how things go locally. So we don't have a written standard for it other than what is in the NINA document. So broken record, but I really encourage you to look at that. And if after looking at that, you still have a lot of questions, please let us know. We will sit and hammer out some advice.
How is it going to be communicated to the phone companies?
We're working on it. Right now, what I would say is, as you look at what you're planning to do, I look at it from the perspective of building a spreadsheet that looks something like this. This is the record, this is how it has to change. Not like this, actually, but you'll see it, that it has, this is the record, these are the changes that have to happen to it, and this is why. That is the product that needs to come out of this, and what happens with that, once that is produced, is still fluid. We're working with I'm at the MSAG right now, not the NLS. I'm sure there will also be TN changes as well, and I think that would be a similar thing, just produce a spread of those errors that you've found.
There could be a bigger issue if there's 4 errors that got corrected, they went back to the phone company to get updated in their database. We're still putting in roads and putting in addresses, and this is still sitting in queue to be.
That's why we're asking you to look at it from a spreadsheet format.
Right.
You look at the MSAG as a whole for whatever jurisdiction you're looking at. You look at that MSAG as a whole body. You create the error list as though all of that is going to happen simultaneously in some magic world.
Well, yeah.
And then we hope that it does actually happen simultaneously in some magic world at CenturyLink or AT&T. But we're asking you as the vendors, and I think we're asking you to produce this spreadsheet. We will try to figure out what happens with it after that.
Yeah, you'd want to do it all at one time, spreadsheet, but once it goes to the phone company.
Did you say Nina has a suggested format for that spreadsheet?
A picture of what it looks like, and so does Sarah Lynn, and I think Sarah Lynn's is, I'm sure that she did it herself, but it's identical to what Nina has in there. And basically it has, the listing, the breakout, directional, street name, all this kind of stuff, the address range, and then at the end of that it says new address high, new address low, new street name, and whatever of those things need to change, you fill out, and at the very end put a reason as to why. If you do not look in the NINA standard and see a document like this, and I'm hallucinating, then we absolutely have one that Sarah Lynn put together.
It's important that what Sherry's getting to as far as the communication with the telephone companies is Sarah Lynn has had the most contact with AT&T, and there's been change in state administrator
How they will accept.
and resistance to, or refusal, maybe is the current term, to accepting it in spreadsheet format, but I think Paul is willing to go at for us and try and get movement on that, but we stand a better chance if we use a consistent format and everybody would, if we could tell AT&T and CenturyLink, we're going to submit, this is how you will receive the data, but it's coming from the PTAPs or the vendors, it's all going to be the same way, it's going to be the same, you're not going to get a different spreadsheet format from each company or PTAP, we're going to do it consistently. We stand a better chance of getting some movement on that issue.
Part of what I'm going to talk about later in the day is a series of documents and geodatabases that you can download. If somebody could please take a note so that I don't forget to do this, we will sample that so that you can look at it. That way we're all on the same page. If you look and you go, oh my gosh, if you guys look at it, you go, oh my gosh, we've done this 100 times and this document isn't going to work, let us know, because we can adjust it. The important thing is just that we're all uniform, because that gives us a better ability to negotiate with the phone companies on getting an expedited process to get these updated.
Hey, Sherry.
Yes?
Later in the day, are you going to go over, I know you mentioned kind of changes in administration with AT&T, but they're offering to provide a webinar and email that Jennifer sent late yesterday.
This is, I'm going to let everybody know about the webinar, but just go ahead and put it out there. In a conversation we had yesterday with Walt, he would like to wait and see if he can get some political movement on that to accept spreadsheets more often than that.
Well, actually, if you document she sent, the plan is actually that they will accept spreadsheets. if you have a handful of changes, and it would make sense to set those on, through the online system. Any more than that, they will accept a spreadsheet, and they will have a technician that will initiate entering those to system. And then what the local government or MSAG coordinator would do would go and view those entries that they've made on your behalf and approve. Once they've been approved, then they'll go through the system. But what it does is alleviates the possibility of human error. And they're flexible to do it. That was indicated on the email from Jessica yesterday, but I don't know how. She understated, and I have a feeling that maybe that she has received some pressure already from above.
Well,
So yes, they're very willing and ready to start working with, but they just want to make sure that individual jurisdiction, so, you know, how can they help and how can they best meet our needs?
I don't want to sit and discuss this a whole lot and tie everybody's time up, but the document that she sent me yesterday doesn't exactly reflect what was in her email. The document she asked me to distribute said that they will not accept street name changes, community changes, or range changes via anything except the IM system. So I'm not sure, maybe that she doesn't need to review the document again before we give it out.
If you want to take a look at that again when you have a chance under resources, it's item number 2.
Okay. I had, and we will stick it out on the website. This is how things stand, and we will put it out for everybody to be able to grab a copy of.
Okay, yeah, and really highly recommend those PSAPs that are AT&T customers to go and submit your request for access to, to that online system that they have. So you can go ahead and start looking at your data, get comfortable with it, and then, whenever they host whatever training is available, it's something that you need to have and be doing anyway.
Absolutely.
My one last question, I guess, with this is, after all the discussion we've had about this, it almost seems like we're going to have to get this synchronization between the center line and the MSAG before we look at geocoding errors, really, because if we went the other way, that could possibly change the way that this synchronization would be.
I would say that if you're looking at a geocoding error that's coming out of the TN list, where error is that the TN didn't code.
So, yeah, that's what I'm saying. This synchronization probably should be done before the geocoding corrections with the TN.
The same research is going to have to go into figuring those one way or the other, but this MSAG remediation is going to take a very long time.
Right,
I would say that, and please correct me if I'm overstepping here, but I would say that we really need that GIS data before that. This is going to take too long to wait until after for that center line.
The problem that I might see out of that is we could, if correcting geocoding, we're going to possibly might be fixing stuff in the TN, we'd be fixing stuff in the center line. That's going to change the match that the synchronization of the MSAG and the center line has.
I do understand that, and
which means then you're going to turn around and you're going to have most likely a way lower match than what it is anyways from the error report. So go around and then we start trying to synchronize this again, and I feel like we're going to be running unless we establish what things to be corrected first. Who's going to hold the highest importance?
the center line. I mean, the center will eventually be the MSAG. The question here is keeping it in line and being able to power things, but there is doubt, I think. Am I wrong? Does anybody agree on that?
I'm totally fine with that.
The center line is the priority.
Okay, and that's fine. Like I said, I just felt like if we start a bunch of correction with geocoding and center line and turn around and try to sync this up, we're gonna cause more error in the TN address points.
Yes, I understand what you're saying completely, I truly.
So that's fine. I just wanted to know, you know, because like I said, we run circles with this for a long time, and we'll establish the order of importance.
To my experience, to my personal experience, in order to correct that centerline file, the same research is gonna have to get done that would get done within this process anyway.
Right.
What you're checking. The actual construction of the changes that have to be made to the MSAG is what is gonna take so very long. So I would say that, you know, you can use these error reports to take a look at that centerline file and correct it, then you know you're starting from good, but actually constructing all of these changes.
So that probably should kind of look at is what errors are found in the center line from the MSAG synchronization.
Right.
Kind of get that done, then do the geocoding,
I would,
get those
that's
out.
how I'm doing it.
Well,
The order
that's
I've chosen to do it in.
kind of what we were after starting with the MSAG synchronization, then I was kind of thinking, okay,
Right.
are we going at this the wrong way?
Well, I speak with two voices a lot of the time. I am standing up here representing the subcommittee, but I am also the GIS
Right.
in Lincoln County. And within that, I can tell you that's how I'm doing it. And I'm starting centerline, doing that research, and then making myself a big list of notes of the MSAG changes that I'm gonna have to do.
I'm thinking, I mean, we had done some stuff for some counties prior to this project. That was the first thing we did, was corrected everything that we found in center line, and then we went from there. And so how we were gonna be going into this, but, you know, like I said, then today we started with talking about this tag stuff and the importance of that, so I was like, okay, I just wanted to, for clarification purposes,
Absolutely.
kind of figure out, because like you said, this is gonna be a lot of time versus not nearly as much time with cleaning up the GIS data.
Cleaning it up, I mean, from a remediation vendor part, when we do the cleanup on the center lines, we're also doing the change report that's necessary for the MSAG.
I would think, yeah.
It's a resource used to determine, particularly on a street name, if the street is incorrect, then you're either gonna fix the GIS, you're gonna fix the MSAG, depending on.
What's wrong, you don't know just from looking.
Yeah,
There's
you're gonna have to
research that
determine
gets
which
done.
one, and then you either fix the GIS or you create your change table for your MSAG.
Right.
Same with your ranges. If you're doing, if that area wants to do an MSAG that actually reflects their center lines,
Right.
then that change file for that MSAG is gonna be generated at the same time we do that. To go and do that in two separate steps is gonna be highly inefficient.
Like, as I have approached it, and certainly a vendor has a different experience, I've approached it, I'm concentrating on fixing the center line or recording the changes that will have to be made somewhere else. I'm just not changing them simultaneously. That's what
Well,
I'm talking about
generate
with
the
two
report.
steps, right, yeah.
Yeah, we generate the report, and that would go back to the 911 MSAG authority that would say, here's
Right.
this, and if that gets passed up to the state to kind of be all brought together into one, it would still be that way.
Yeah.
But we're talking the same thing, we're doing the same process, but when you were talking about the MSAG remediation as a sort of line item on it, so
Yes.
we're generating that report at the same time as we're cleaning up the center lines, so it's kind of hard to separate the two out.
So, but you know what to say to that. This was a request that we received yesterday to have these cut out separately, so.
Well, in my mind, if you're fixing the center line and you're identifying an MSAG error that's going to need fixed, there's going to be time involved in creating that list of errors. And that's what we want separated out, is how long is it going to take you to create that list? And, you know,
If you're, you have to put what your process is and what your bid is.
Right.
And it's gonna be different for every agency. They have different capability, different experience, everything.
not easy. It's really not, because how long does that take? Who knows?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a tough one, but we have a whole lot to go through in the rest of the document, and I know we at least have, in all of the documents, because we haven't touched it yet, so I'm gonna ask unless somebody has anything really, really pressing that we table MTAG for right now and we move on. But we have time to get through everything here, because there's a lot more that needs to get done that coordinating council is asking to happen on a much quicker time frame than this MTAG. And I wanna make sure that we hit that and address all of your questions or concerns with that. And I know we have on the phone and in the room some local agencies that are deciding if they're going to remediate their own data or if they're gonna be asking a vendor to do it, and they need this information to make that decision. So I wanna be sure and kinda slide forward here. I've somebody off, so you on the phone, I just ran somebody out of the room. So let's go on and hit the Kansas NG911 GIS data model. This model started from, let me back up here. This model started with two things, Nina's draft standard, and it actually built off of Nina's draft standard from October of 2013. They are still working on finalizing their standard. And then a document from Tennessee that they did a couple of years ago. We started with Nina's draft standard. We knew we wanted to write something to give more guidance on how remediation ought to happen and what data ought to look like in Kansas, particularly as we go forward trying to make a statewide data set. But we weren't really sure how to do that. Unfortunately, Tennessee and Patrick, I think you were actually instrumental in writing that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wrote them.
There you go. But we wrote the Tennessee document, and we were like, oh, we could just make a few changes to this and go forward. And found things in Tennessee and things in Kansas are a lot different, and the standards have changed over time. And so we have pieces of the Tennessee document that are still there, particularly in the absolutely fantastic graphics that they used to outline dual carriageways and a few other things. But what we're looking at largely is the NINA standard with some Kansas stuff added in that we thought would be helpful for irrigation and thought would be helpful for this, that we know locally, here in Kansas, we want to do with the data. So that's where it starts from. As you look at the document itself, you need to know a couple of conventions. First of all, it says shall or must. This is a requirement. It be done that way. It says recommended or preferred. It's a good idea, but it's not the law. You can choose to it or not. A couple of the things that we recommended for the purpose of saying, really love to be able to have everybody do this, but it's fiscally reasonable, or the time investment may be unreasonable to require everyone to do it, so we're just saying this is a good idea. Terms in the document are data stewards, which is whoever's responsible for maintaining the data. That may be a GIS department at your county, it may be a liaison at your county or city, or ESAP that is working with a vendor. Whoever, data steward is the person responsible for maintaining the data. These are data aggregation and the data aggregator. All eventually going to get seamed together in a statewide data set by the data aggregator. And there are a few things they're going to do, they are going to need. And so when you see those terms, that's what we're talking about. Authority data only. Every submitted by the doer must be inside their authoritative boundary polygons. That's how 911 data. I was going to throw a slide up here and I didn't get time to get it in there, but in Dickinson County, we respond, our ambulance and our fire respond so far outside of our county in some cases that we have 10 miles outside our county in every direction of roads in our 911 data. Our dispatch requires it. We got the authority of what that data looks like. We got, whether we think we have good data, better data, worse data, or whatever, we can dictate what the address ranges are on the roads in another county. We dictate what the address points are to be read to a PSAP in another county. So, the authoritative boundary polygon is probably county or city boundary, but whatever it is, it's the under which you have authority. Every has tenants. has to be inside it. We'll talk about some of these things more specifically. Any questions about it?
You have that?
Nope, first page. We do not. I've already discussed this just briefly, but if you did not maintain a county, like, say, Hughes County, because I'm a county person, and it's just how, if you don't maintain a county polygon, and you want one to start from, task will generate one for you off of the tax unit map that they're maintaining statewide. Because we know which of those tax units pay taxes to that county, and that should create a county polygon. However, currently, no official state map of the county boundaries. So you may get that, and you may go up. It needs to start here, it needs to come here. They didn't realize that half of Solomon is not in Saline County, it's in Dickinson County. Tiger data and most state data does that in our county. A little nub out to the side that nobody remembers. So we give you a place to start from, but it's not authoritative. What we're asking is that you send back what you think is authoritative, and then we will begin the process of aggregation. Where there is conflict, we will begin discussion, and we'll sit down with everybody involved. That process has not been figured out yet, but we're asking you to submit what you think is authoritative, and if you want something to start from, DAF can generate it.
So who is we submit back to the we?
Well, right now, you're looking at the face of the we in this city because we don't have a data aggregation plan finished. Almost the minute this meeting is over, we're going to start talking about data aggregation. This is sort of in process, but the aggregator, however that turns out, which should be very soon, we will know, you'll be into the data aggregator. This is post-QA. Right now, the we is AOS. We're going to be submitting those changes for QA.
Post-QA, right.
Yeah, a couple of hours to make
Go
that
ahead.
comment. It goes to AOS for QA, and then once, we have aggregation plan in place, then we'll go to the whoever's handling the aggregation, and they'll bring those pieces together. But, Sherry mentioned the tax unit map, and about half the counties that are in that database are, that data via their GIS system, and most of those based off their parcels. So, in most cases, we feel it's a good place to start, and at least we can provide out, and if the county needs to submit or shape or revise that, then that gets a good place to start, but it's up to the county to define that, what their authoritative boundary is. So we're rolling. It's obviously not just up to us to say, well, this is your boundary. It gives us a place to start from and make an adjustments necessary.
And for city level PSAP, that's of course for all of you, I'm sure, are more familiar, more in the weeds, because it's a city limit boundary, it's a municipal boundary. If they're not maintaining it, it'll have to be developed as part of the boundary layer.
But with that gives us sort of we can adjust that as we go, and it gives us a quote-unquote seamless boundary to start from. And as we, the other project we have going on right now is we received the proposals at the end of last week for the state aerial project. And as we start with that imagery, we can go in and identify tie points, which is something important aggregation as well. So, how we aggregate and tie that data down together. So those two things will kind of dovetail together nicely.
There is not a single member of the committee, either in this room, on this phone, or not here, that is not aware how enormous this is. What an enormous mountain this is to climb. But we're going to try to climb it, and one step at a time is all we can do. So this is where we're at. Any questions about this authoritative boundary? Does everyone understand what we're saying here? Part of this is Nina. One of them I added, and I think Nina will probably correct. One, as you get attributes, they will be marked as this is type A. That means the numerics are text. Even if numbers, it has to be stored as text. And now type D is date and time. We have already had a discussion about this because Nina is asking for a very specific and very difficult to produce date time format in the final data. That is not your problem. We are asking for a standard date field. The aggregator will worry about making that Nina format. Numeric means integer field. It means whole numbers only, decimals at the end. place, Nina's clear on that, but then they also called a decimal degree numeric field. So they're gonna be going, they're gonna do an edit to that. We own numeric, decimal, or MD means that's a decimal field. You'll see the standard all the way through. That is the field format you should be using for these fields. Every attribute is listed within the tables that we will go over as mandatory, conditional, or optional. It means it has to be filled out. Conditional means if the value in existence for it has to be filled out. And optional means as you would like to have, some of them you'd probably wish that everybody would fill out, but they're optional for a reason. So that convention is used all the way through the document. Everything in the attribute table that we put has to be there. Trying to trim out, and as we get to some of these, you will begin to see what I'm talking about. We're trying to trim out the ones that shouldn't be there and cut some of the fat off of it. But everything needs to be there, and unless you have a business reason not to, we'd like them to be in the same field order. Now, I know for most database applications, that is not a big deal. A person who is database oriented, even putting the fields had to be in the same order kind of gave me a little bit of a rash, because it had no meaning. But working for that because of the needs of various software, because of the various people that are going to be using this data. So if you had this reason to put it in a different order, like your CAD software won't take it in that order or some other thing, you can put it in a different order, but we'd like it to be the same. You can call fields whatever you want, but if you choose not to use the ones we have, metadata has to show the field map. This is GDC compliant metadata. We actually have in the documents the section of metadata that has to be filled out for every field if you choose a different field name than our recommendation. You may have a business need to, but the aggregator has got to know for certain and not guess what you're to say with that field, so it's got to be filled out. The low data has to have a unique identifier. Some of you pair this with the NINA standard and go, oh, you're adding a field that isn't there. The reason is our standard is for local entities that are maintaining their data. So we're asking you to do a unique identifier that is unique to you. The aggregator will turn that into an identifier unique to everyone. If the domain, it lists values. Domain is a database term in general and a geodatabase term in specific with Esri. If there's a domain listed, you must use it and may not deviate from it. So these domains, one second, let me finish this and I'll get you. The purpose of these domains is to facilitate them moving between the different pieces of the ESInet. By sitting up there with all the pieces, you would be kind of excited. There's probably 20 pieces sitting in the middle of there. So some of those pieces are only going to be able to read the values that NINA has prescribed, because that's what the vendors are going to go off of to create that software and hardware. Yes, sir.
You say unique identifier within, our generic object ID, which is unique in that particular feature class for that particular data set. As soon as you move it out, it changes the,
right.
Is that unique enough, or
No.
do you want unique stagnant?
We have unique and stagnant. We have a separate field in each one of these tables. It is a unique identifier. It doesn't matter what it is. You can use some sort of auto-generated number if you have the scripting to do that. You can use creation date and time. You can create some concatenated name that is unique, whatever works for you. We made it long enough that I want to use the global unique identifier and have that auto-generate. That's cool too. For those of you that are familiar with it, it's a big, long 38-character thing. It has to be unique and static in the local data.
It could be another local data.
Absolutely. There can be 117 number ones, and that can cause us a problem. Anybody?
Within that one layer, or?
Yeah, within that one layer. There's an exception to that, but I will get to it when we get there. locally, we've decided to use the creation date. E-generate, and it's automatically unique, so, date and time, I should, anyway. So, center lines. We will start with the geometry on road center lines. They cover all public roads and private roads that have been addressed. Segments that be broken actually get skipped and start with the second one. At every boundary that they intersect, essentially, state, county, municipal, ESB, ESD. At road, we do type in the table, but it is optional. If you're using that, of course, you'd want to break the Senate surface type as well. One is, the very first one is every intersection with another segment. This is for underpasses and overpasses. To deal with actual road intersection with another field that we'll talk about later. But the point of how you do this was to make it so that the aggregator, whoever that is, can do a quick, verifiable topology to make sure that the new data that's getting submitted every time it gets submitted fits and works. If you go ahead and put a segment over overpasses and underpasses and do not break them, they're going to hit those at least in some fashion every time they do it. So, every time cut.
Change.
Now, the other thing, and I don't on this slide, but you'll see it in the document, if you break it exchange, that's you can break where you need to. This is in the document is that it requires the center to be on the road surface in the best available aerial photography. It will be the big statewide set once that is around. We recommend it be within 10 feet of the center. That's awesome. But not going to get that done. This isn't good. This passes. But it passes. That's what we'd like. For those of you that are grant-funded remediators, if you're getting grant funds to remediate and you have to create center lines, that's how you have to create them. You do not have to go back old ones to this. They have to be fixed to the primary standard. Any of that you can discuss with the PSAP. As far as I know, yes. There are a couple of softwares out there that when you convert into shapefile get a little hinky with all those vertices that get added with Bezier curves. But I don't think nobody has discussed trying to accommodate that at this point. So I think you're fine with doing Bezier curves. And yes, this particular one was made with vertices and not with curves. But I don't see any reason why. Does anybody disagree with me? I don't see any reason why they couldn't use those if they wanted to. Cool. So we're about to open the document up itself and take a look at the attributes, the special cases, and the summary of the standards. So let me go up on that and open up version 7. Oh, you guys haven't read all that? There we go. So, the attribute table, I'm going to start here. There's better descriptions of the attributes later, but I want to start here because it talks about the types. The first attribute in every table is steward. In likelihood, in your files, that's all going to be one number. You got as default and forget it's there. It is the agency that owns the record. It is the agency that is responsible for it. And when we create a global identifier or an aggregated data set unique identifier, what we are going to do is take the local unique identifier at that steward. So We know what those are, we know what we're asking you to do with that, and it's in the back of the document. I'll hit it just a little bit later. The last date it was updated. Whenever you make a change to these after the initial turn-in, that needs to be updated. It is mandatory. Nina did that. Those of you that are using every software at 10.1, and I think even in one of the corrections of 10.0, they introduced some editor tracking where you can fill that field, and another one that will be important later, automatically. A template geodatabase, one for Kansas North and one for Kansas South, that has domains and everything preloaded, and every table in that is automatically set up with editor tracking. So ignore those fields if you use it, or if you just want to take a look at it and see how I did it. Having the fifth expiration date, there's an explanation of those in the document. I don't anticipate they're going to get used a whole lot. Effective date for anything you currently have, if you're not tracking this, just put January 1st to 14. Local unique identifier, and then we start with all the left and right fields. There are a few here. We mount because the data aggregator will add them. They're going to be everybody. None of us are in a different country. So there's no for you guys to have to track that. We do have roads that are right side one state, left side the other state. That's why state is still there. You will have municipal division, neighborhood, and address range prefix are currently crossed out. That's because yesterday we had a conversation with Mark Berryman, who is the chair of the committee working on the NENA standard. One of the things he said is, have those in Kansas, because we have them in Houston and Texas. The rest of the state doesn't have them. Our area Johnson County doesn't have them. Sedgwick County doesn't have them. He says take them out of there, and agree with him. If somebody's going to accidentally put something in, it's going to confuse people, so we're going to yank them. So you're doing appraisal work, that neighborhood's already confused you. You thought it was an appraisal thing. I know I did. I thought, why about that? Anyway, address prefix is the same thing. I left these in so that you guys could tell me if we're wrong. Do you owe the letter for your address numbers? That's what this is for. If you ignore 121 Northeast 1st Street, does anyone do that, or do you know of anyone that does?
I'm not sure. My grandpa has a weird address in, Sheridan.
Okay.
They have two directional prefixes.
So it's for the street?
Well, yeah, it's like
Okay.
north 150th Road.
Okay, yeah, that is what it is. Okay. See, I remember when they got their new address, that it was really weird.
We're looking to yank that, but we're waiting to see if anybody, if it hits anybody. We have the all roads database to check. We have a few other places to check and see if there's any movement of that in there, but my guess is no. So those will not. Then you run these two addresses. We used to have the parity. Top right now you have municipality left, then you have postal community left. Move on down, you'll have MSAG community left and right.
So, source of good postal community.
There is a source of postal community data.
That's a good question.
That was Tiger's zip file is about the best anybody can come up with. If you can find a better one, tell us. We'll let everybody know. Then run into some of the weeds with the MSAG too, but I'll leave for another discussion. That's the source anybody's aware of. Left and right. The additional field for NENA means we have to have it because we have an ESN for every street center line in Kansas that I know of. And this is where you start getting into how can you do the center line without the MSAG. Oh.
This will still
conditional means if it doesn't apply, you don't have, I don't know what have it conditional. I don't know what center lines they think won't have an ESN somewhere in the United States, but.
I think in the main doc they're working on, there's an asterisk that says because it's going away, that
Well, they do that with all of the MSAG stuff, but maybe that is why they make it conditional, make these particular ones conditional. And that was done, because agencies will need it longer than others, so if you need to fill it out, and if you don't yet, then. Stream pre-modifier is also crossed out. If instead of saying the Westwood bypass, you say bypass Westwood, they realize that's happening either, but. So we're gonna cross that one unless we find something. Then we down, it's gonna discuss descriptions down here. In the document, you have a description. It explains a definition for the attributes. Most of these came straight from Nina. Some of them are slightly edited for what we're doing in Kansas, but we don't change the meaning of anything that Nina did. If there is a main, it's mentioned here. If it is a short list, it's listed here too. Sorry. Okay, one of the ones comes with the ESN right and left. I want to make sure that people understand this, because we have a lot of places in Kansas where this applies, and Nina did not consider it. Sounds from what Barry said yesterday like they're going to try to put it in the document, though. Annex either the road, so they can ticket on it, or the land either side of the road, so that they do not have to maintain the road. This has happened in a whole lot of small cities across Kansas, and maybe big ones, I don't know.
Yes.
But, in the ES right is the addresses in the land on the right side, outside of the right-of-way. Table's right there. Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, I can be back this afternoon if that'd be all right. Good, thank you. Thank you. Then left and right, or the land that's out the right-of-way. What is in the right-of-way happens to be a completely different ESN than either of those. We call it SNC. It only needs to be populated if the ESN of the center line is actually physically different than the ESN of the other side of it. Maybe this is a Kansas thing, but what Berryman was saying on the phone last night is he just found out about it. Apparently, it's not a Texas thing, that's where he's from. But he just found out about it from a meeting in New York. It's pretty prevalent in New York as well, so they're going to address it in the next draft. There you go. So, it's important to note within the stream, I'm kind of blowing by these address fields because we've all seen them before. It's important to note a couple of things. First of all, if you have Avenue 3, it has to be fully spelled out, not abbreviated. This is called the preceding type or the pre-type to a street name. It has to be fully spelled out. If it's post-type, 3rd Avenue, it has to be abbreviated.
is that, MSAGs have Avenue as AV, they
Yes.
don't follow postal, but
Right.
some vendors need it to follow what comes in from the alley spill versus
Right.
what is postal.
One of the big, one of the things we're about to do, Mark is about to embark on this, is to take some of the sample data and produce a report how to get, not the MSAG with all the other stuff we were discussing, just have it meet NENA standard. What are we gonna have to look at? We're
Yeah.
communicating with the phone companies
And
about
the
that.
AV to fit the NENA standard,
Yeah.
document 28 from the post office.
Will they do that though?
We'll do the updates. In
Yeah.
fact, the document that we were discussing earlier that is in a little bit of question, that document specifically talks about fixing that. They want fixed, they're willing to accept that in whatever way you can present it to them. I need to make a note, or if somebody could make a note for me so I can do this later, we need to be very clear in this description. This is the name that the local addressing authority has given it. The US Highway 77, but the addressing authority assigns addresses as HWY space 77. This has to be HWY space 77. It is what the addresses. That's what it's, the other derivation will go into the road alias statement.
This has come up, I've been asked this a few times, and I don't know the answer. Somebody asked me, what are the adjust ranges on I-70, for which there are no access points.
Right.
What is, for rest stop, does adjust ranges not apply to highways?
So they absolutely apply to highways if they're using them. In Dickinson County, of course, I-70 runs right through the middle, we have zeros. But zeros because we don't have anything that's the address straight off of them. I think the rest stop over by Solomon, which is the one in my personal experience, it's just in Saline County, they actually have, and they have addressed it off that address.
We addressed, the stations on I-35, so they have South I-35 addresses.
Okay.
Then the tunnels up on I-35, and then of course on State Highway, since we have direct access into businesses and residents are addressed that way.
I think you'll find that different jurisdictions handled it differently as they went to 911 addressing. And, have addresses on it, the range needs to be there. There's no, interstates don't have them, highways do, or anything like that. I think it has to do with what your local addressing authority is using for assignment.
About punctuation.
If there is a hyphen or a period or anything like that in the road name, it needs to be on. This needs to be character, alphanumerics only. That's gonna be kind of a toughie, but actually that was part of the conversation with Berryman yesterday, that they will hang up pieces of gen systems. So we need to make sure, that they're all pulled out of that street name field. I don't know the exact full list that they're gonna come up with. I know he talked about dashes and periods, but I think ampersands are still gonna be okay. I have to check to be sure. Whatever will be in this document.
Probably something similar to what you run into in your web programming.
Yes.
If you use a symbol that's similar to what the application runs on, then it airs it out. Like if you use it in a username and password, they just don't work.
Right.
Plain and simple.
Yes.
What about the word saint, abbreviation?
ST space.
It is ST space?
ST space, Michael's ST space, Adam, yeah. There was a discussion, from what I understand, on the NINA side of spelling it out and having it say INT, but that's what they have in their examples for right now.
We have South St. Francis down Spring Hill, and the Saint is abbreviated into center line and the point data.
Even examples of HWY 4 or something, where they've got industry, or county will have HWY in the pre,
Right.
and then 4 name. I mean,
This is,
we have to stick with what the county already has an address or.
yes, the thing is that you already have a business process going on that accounts for it where it is. And everyone through the process from the national standards down is aware of that. So there's actually no guidance in here of if it is Highway 4, where you put it. There's suggestion in here because you have a place you want it. I put in street name. You might pre-type. Somebody else might put, 4 in some other field or something. And the thing is, we could all probably make a good argument for why our way is best, but we have software that is running off this stuff, so we've got to accommodate that.
Customers already, tell me what it is.
The thing is that not all of these fields need to be filled out, but as many of them as you feel you need for your data. A whole lot of software vendors are not yet ready to break an address out this far. So there's some of these you're just not going to be able to use simply because you have a local business process that isn't going to work with them that's broken out. It has to be at the local level. Oh, we actually added a label field. I'll It's right there. We're asking that whatever the fully concatenated street name is, all the way from whatever pre-directional, pre-modifier, whatever, all the way to the very end, they give us a field that just has that properly spaced in proper case. It will be nice for dispatchers to read, it will display nicely on any map we have to create, and it'll give us a nice reference point for telling you what we have found wrong. So we're not telling you it's a street segment 30 when you have 4 of them. Exactly what the name is to refer to. It is mandatory, that does have to be filled out. Of that, speed limit, one-way, and road class, those are all optional fields. They're all, NINA fields. Fill them out, applicable as you like. The sets are the ones we added that you will not find in NINA. Table is, of course, the top, and we have updated by. Like I said, you can set this to be automatic, but it is the last person that updated the record. If you're a shop, turn it. If you're a shop, it will allow aggregator to communicate. If so-and-so made some change, you know what maybe agency that is, what department that is. The larger your agency, I think the more important this is actually going to be in, but it needs to be filled out for everybody. It's mandatory. It's an optional, but be really valuable if we're ever trying to send a truck to your jurisdiction or the jurisdiction of your client to help them. This data, I am certain, is going to get pulled for that purpose. Knowing which road it can drive down and not is the reason we have this surface field here. We have already been asked several times to add additional pipes. This is not a complete list. We are not additional pipes. This list exists is entirely to say, can you drive on this road in the rain? So every type of pavement, whether it's chip seal, whether it's oil top, whatever you have done to it, it's paved. You brought in rock or sand or gravel or whatever type of surface material, and you covered that road and you regularly maintain it. So you didn't add anything to it. You might have blade down it, but it turns to mud in the rain. Proposed, we're going to do it someday, but we haven't yet. It was legally declared minimum maintenance. That happens at counties. If you're not familiar with that process, it does happen. And what that means is, they're not even going to run a blade down it, but maybe once a year. So it's drawn likely. so what that field is for. We encourage you to fill it out. It is an optional field. If you go and you look and you go, oh my goodness, my road and bridge department or my customer keeps this as an oil topper, it's been chip sealed, or it had a 2-inch overlay, or whatever they're holding in that data, these are the reasons, and they're that limited for a reason.
So you say optional, let's say the surface has that, there's nothing there, but it's optional, they want us to do it, the vendor to do it.
Right.
We have to put that in our bid and proposal, how long that's gonna take to do that, if it's an optional.
What we have
Are
in
they
the
gonna pay for
document
that?
right now is that optional fields are not gonna be grant funded.
So they can put it.
It can, statewide road center line with that information on them, so if you, were to provide the vendor, with our public domain data with that on it, you could leave it there, or maybe you could change it a little bit, and that's, I'd like to maintain that, or have that improved, if it's optional.
Absolutely, and any local jurisdiction that tries to keep up on this that is township-based and not, what's called county unit, which means townships maintain their own roads, knows it's really hard to track where they're graveling and where they have mud. They change it based on who's occupying a house currently. It's a very fluid situation, so this is a hard thing to track even at an agency like ours where road and bridge is really one of the big drivers of our GIS. So, we want it in there, but we understand the difficulties of it. You'll be out of date with it sometimes. Have fields at the bottom, elevation from and to, which I'm going to explain with a graphic here in a minute, and the travel field. Somebody on the committee may be going, travel field? We've never heard about that one. This again came from Mark Berry last night. He recommended that it would be very valuable to be able to transmit to the dispatcher, this is westbound I-70 or eastbound I-70. The one-way attribute, which tells you what's going from the from node to the to node or from to, is not helpful to the dispatcher. So this is only for divided highways, and it's just for you to put some description in there of the direction, westbound, eastbound, northbound, southbound. For those of you with loops, it may be in the outside, however your dispatchers are comfortable referring to it. We not put a domain on it, and it is 20 characters long. So whatever it is going to require to describe which lane it is for the dispatcher to understand, that's what you can put in there. It is also. So there are details of this that I am not going over that are in the document, and I encourage you to look over them, but I am going to hop down through some of them. I think most of you have a pretty good grasp of how to handle an intersection point and how an address range actually works, but in case that you don't, we have some description in here. We talk about the difference between potential and actual address ranges, and what I do locally is cool. What the customer does is cool. What we do recommend, but only recommend, is in the cities, if the only address is up to, say, 88 on most of their roads, and the address range all the way to 99, it's going to skew that geocoding quite a bit. So no, they only go up to about 48, run that thing to 50. But it's a relation. If you just go to 99 and that's where you want them, that is cool. One street, you have to put the direct travel on it. But that's the only weird about that. The big that I wanted to hit is are these dual carriageways. You have a minimum of one center line on either side of a physical barrier. So like this description right here, which is 2 lanes on one side, 3 lanes on the other, it's 2 center lines, one for the eastbound, one for the westbound. No address ranges are set up. One of them has, they each have addresses only on one side.
Do you have to look here?
Have to hit that. If there is a physical barrier, you must.
What's physical? Is that a fire truck cannot cross over, or something that?
It is, I believe, and please don't quote me on this, that I'm thinking in their document, it is a 4-foot or wider median. I think that's the newest document that he sent last night, had it in there. What we were thinking of is there is actual non-drivable roadway. If just painted on asphalt, you have one center line if you choose to. But it's not, if it's not improved roadway, 2.
Yeah, we run into problems, especially in Overland Park. We've got a station at 135th and Schweitzer. So they got the station and go eastbound on 135th. We have the one center line, and we hit on an address, except they have to go to the next intersection, loop back around because of limited access. So if we do a carriageway, when they press that button on their MDT, it'll show them going past where the call's at to make the turn, that intersection, so they can come back westbound and go into the strip center to get to it. That drives some of our field crews crazy. Well, it pointed here, but we couldn't turn left. And I said, well, yeah, you got your edge of pavement on your MDT also that you should be looking at, or your aerial, so you know you can't turn there. But it'll benefit them, and it'll give us some more accurate response times, calculations in our CAD.
I've brought this on where they designed it because they figured if a fire truck could cross over it, like just a step median, that they want their fire truck to be routed all the way around.
The fire truck they won't jump the curb and try to make the turn. They'll stay on the.
We're asking it to be, if it's physically divided, to cut it. If the local agency, if your client has a major issue with that, they can communicate with us, and it's entirely possible that they may be presenting something that we need to consider in the standard. Right now, the standard is they don't have a choice.
They occasionally go eastbound and southbound, or they'll occasionally go the wrong way. It's a lot of fun.
So you're saying it's optional if it's painted and if it's 4 feet or more?
If it's painted in 4 feet or less.
4 feet or less, okay.
Yeah.
So, and do we set some standard about what the length
Yes, it is one block, it is between intersections. What you're looking at right here is an example of when you don't have to do that. This is what is called a small reserve. You'll see them as a place to put a sign at the front of a subdivision or something like that. You may see divisions in the middle of a city street where they have gone around a tree. You do not have to carry away that and hook it back together. If the full intersection to intersection is divided, it needs to be divided, otherwise you don't need to.
What we're gonna do, like, tenth of a mile urban and different distance rural.
We talked about distances, and my understanding is that Nina is setting that within their document. If we need to discuss it, of doing something different, we can.
That's different for federal highways
Okay.
than what you're saying.
Then what I would suggest is that you guys make a note that you need to look at this as version 1 comes out, which is gonna happen shortly, because we will discuss this in committee and know that we are in line with thing we need to be. For now, though, the short form is if it's a small reserve or a tree or something like that, you don't have to split. If you do dual carriageways, there are rules on how they have to connect to single carriageways and other dual carriageways. And those are listed in here. I'm not going to go over them in detail, but connectivity is required in order to be able to route that fire truck he's talking about. So you're welcome to go through them. If you see something in that you disagree with or that you think we've done wrong, you're welcome to communicate with us, and we will discuss it in committee. For right now, that's how it's set.
Is it, the QA reports will reflect those coded, those
Probably. I can't say definitely because the original QA was to a different standard than this, so those conversations still have to happen. That's fair. Traffic circles, I wish we could have just left it out. But I've had more questions about traffic circles than I have any other aspect of this. It's just killed me. But basically, all we were trying to say by including this is that you only want address ranges on a traffic circle on the side that actually has an address range. If they do not address the traffic circle at all, local agencies, some local agencies don't. We run right up here in the text that you name it by the major road involved. A traffic circle is usually a major, minor intersecting. It is not addressing. We recommend you name it off of the major road, and then put zeros on the address ranges. But that is recommendation, says recommended. If you're doing something different, it's probably not wrong. There's really no good way to handle a traffic circle. The line I'm going to use before we eat is the last thing in the center line layer, which is the elevation. Because we're asking you to cut those lines every single time they cross each other, we are asking you to cut them even at overpasses and underpasses, which means that the computer will get confused and think you can turn left from I-70 onto a dirt road in your county. And you. So how we are going to handle that? We are handling that with what is a tried and true method of elevation values. You do elevation of the road, not a measurement. It is 0 1s. The lowest road has a 0. The overpassing road has a 1. So, in the example that you're looking at right here, this is G Road overpassing 500 Avenue. And if you might say, oh, that's actually 2 gravel roads, they don't do this, but matters. It's an illustration. And what you do is all roads and those from and tos, and Jeep Road starts at 0, ends at 1, starts at 1, ends at 0. Create a little sort of bump over the road. We can tell the computer then that you can't turn from a 1 to a 0, and it suddenly knows where our intersections are. For jurisdictions in Kansas, almost everything's going to be a 0. You could populate that whole thing at zeros and be off to an amazing start. For those jurisdictions that have a whole lot of overpasses, and we had one mention how much work it's going to be, you know, we certainly understand that. It is going to be a whole heck of a lot of work to add that if you're not already doing it. I think Johnson County's already doing it, aren't you?
Yeah, we did Well,
essentially this.
it's all done in Johnson, in Miami County,
Uh-huh,
because we use it for, law enforcement and fire and EMS routing.
right.
We just loaded, Bryan County maps into our CAD because of an auto weight agreement.
Mhm.
Their center line didn't have it, and we're routing off it, so we fixed
You have to fix
what we
it.
needed to fix.
I just did Dickinson County, tell anybody that I'm on conference calls with all the time. I just did Dickinson County on a conference call the other day. Because the entire county is zeros except for our under and overpasses of I-70. So it was a relatively simple process. It didn't take me more than half an hour. And that was me on a call, talking, taking notes. So for most agencies, it's gonna be pretty easy. For the larger agencies that are not doing it, it is gonna be pretty serious. Hello. This is a more complicated. This is when you have a dual carriageway, Jeep crossing I-70, and I only put this in here so that you see the segment starts at 0, ends at 1. The one that goes across the carriageway, they're both ones, starts at 1, ends at 0. I've had people ask what you do for underpasses. The ass is 0, the surface load is 1, and if anybody has a Decker road, in our state, I don't think they do, but if anybody does, you just add a number, 2, 3.
Kansas City does.
Do they? This is something that has been used in a whole lot of very large agencies. It's used in some DOTs as well, when they're keeping a center line before they move to LRS. The highest number anybody's ever had to use is 4, and that's LA, and I'm just really glad I don't have to map that. But, that's the idea there. I guess there was another thing here, I'm sorry, I forgot. This is a description of what to do. If you have addresses with 2 different road names, one segment that they addressed one set off of an old road name and one set off of a new, there are some places where that's happened. We have 2 to handle that. This is the preferred, which is you put a center line for each one. If you're not comfortable with that for whatever reason, it's gonna cause a problem in your software or whatever, you can actually create a radius entry that includes alias addressing. And the description of how to do that is in here, but it's going to be so rare that anybody chooses this, I'm not going to spend a lot of time.
That'll be the same if the city address is on one side and the county address is on the other side?
You should actually, if their address ranges are different, yes.
Right.
If they're using the same numbering, but the 2 different.
We ran into a case prior to all this where actually addresses the range, and it's different. So if you break it up like that, it's the same.
This is principle, yeah. The same address ranges on jurisdictional boundaries. Solomon Road runs between Dickinson County and Saline County. We address the east side, they address the west side. And my data needs to have 0. Data that you assign needs to have 0. We're working out exactly how all that's going to get aggregated, but that is the way you handle it. If you don't assign the addresses, 0 is on the center line. We have a couple of notes here, about access ramps and service drives, but they're nothing crazy. You're welcome to review them. And then we have a summary. Traffic circles, the second most common question is, what do you mean by continually updated? We don't. Continually updated is if you don't have the sign for a new road in your data and someone calls 911 from it, that call won't route. Continually updated is as soon as you know about it. How are you going to be expected to confirm that there are or not updates? How frequently will you be allowed to submit? All of them will be coming out with data aggregation. The understanding that everybody needs to have is that you can't decide you're only going to update these once a year. In some cases, you're not even going to be able to decide you're only going to update these once a month. You're going to, if you have a brand new subdivision going in, or even just a new street that's being built, and they put a trailer out there with a phone for the construction workers, you need that street even if the surface isn't there yet. So, continually updated is as often as it needs to happen. How often people will be required to say, yeah, I'm confirming I don't have any changes, we don't know that yet. That'll be something that washes out with aggregation. Fix that test. What you see running down through here is the same stuff that we have talked about. Basically, we want you to meet or exceed NENA standards, where you can look to find those things, how mandatory and conditional attributes have to be filled out when you split lines. We will summary updated, hopefully, with all of the mandates. Anything that we say have to, we'll try to keep in that summary so you have a quick place to look and see if that's changed. Fast and dirty, and I didn't give you guys a lot of breaths for questions, but like I said, we've got a whole lot to get through, and the lunch sitting over there for those of us that are not on the phone, wafting directions. So, does anybody have any questions about Centerline? Hear anything we said and go, oh my gosh, what the heck were you thinking? Not just
I don't count. It's the only time I don't count.
Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking was, when you said it has to zero out on outside our county boundary, like the other side of the road,
Right.
that may be something we would want to wait until we're ready to submit to zero out.
Sure. If
Because
there,
we're still working in our own little world.
yeah.
Some of that data has to stay.
Absolutely, and that is a very good point. The local, either if they're remediating their own data or after the remediation, when they're maintaining, are going to have to figure out a way to keep it in a condition where it will power all of their business processes, their local stuff, their CAD, their whatever, and do this. They're going to be doing, I can't speak about it in much detail because there isn't much to tell you, but there's going to be some training eventually that will give suggestions on how it might be done easily to try to help you maintain that, because we do understand, and the council certainly understands, that you do not build data to power a statewide database. You build data for your jurisdiction, and you have to do that first. So we're going to do everything we can to support you to be able to fill both roles, but the bottom line is, with this being so necessary for life safety, you got to do this too. We'll do as much as we can, but yes, I would suggest you wait until submission to do that. Are there any questions on the phone? Okay, so then I am going to take just about a 20 to 30 minute break for everybody to grab something to eat. Then we will kick back up and get started again. I'll mute the phone so that you don't have to listen to us chew. We are coming back together and going to get started again. Everybody to go. Since we talked Centerline, before I move on to address points, I'm going to hit the road alias layer, which I was a little bit alien to some people. We had a lot of questions that indicated to me people maybe as comfortable with it, or knowing it was out there. This table has no spatial element. It is only a table with a relationship to the Centerline file. Thank you. And what it says is for road segments, these are the other names besides their address name. Some people have a whole lot of need for this. You may have a business process locally that makes it really important for you. For example, people that have recently switched over to 911 addressing that in the last 10 or 15 years have just readdressed their roads. Often locals call 911, they give a different name. They give the name they've used for, decades, rather than the new one you gave it, which maybe they don't like or don't remember. And so this allows you to store that other name without having to create a false copy of the center line. It allows you to tie all of the multiple names for a road. The only place that this is required within our standard is for highways. And that is U.S. highways, it's federal highways or state highways. And the reason we're doing that is because every local addressing agency chose to address those roads with a different road name. The example we always use is us in Gary County. Highway 18 runs through the road in Gary County. It is HWY space 18. So if you live at 500 Highway 18, US is 500 space HWY space 18. On the other hand, if you live at 500 Highway 18 in Gary County, it is 500 space 4 highway, something like that. This is so regular and so frequently done that I can actually tell if an address is in my county or not just by how they formatted that name. We didn't assign that strange formatting that we didn't use. Now, you have to use that name, whatever the addresses are assigned with, as the name of the line file. That's NINA's requirement, and it's an understandable requirement because that's where it's going to get hit for geocoding. We do have a whole lot of reasons to know you follow Highway 18 as it crosses the state. As it crosses out of Gary County and into Dickinson County, you want to be able to know you're on the same road. The computer's going to figure this out without us telling them, and how we are going to tell them is with the road alias table. While you are welcome to use this for whatever purpose you want, if you want to record your old county road numbers, or old names, or different names, or colloquially use use names, you're welcome to put a million records in there if you want to. The only for state highways, they have to be like this. For segments in your county that is Kansas Highway 12, there has to be a road alias entry that says K12, no space, no nothing, just K12. Segments in your jurisdiction that is U.S. Highway 44, U.S. 44, no space, no dash, no nothing. But you put in this field, what it's going to look like on a map is whatever you want. It's insignificant. What we're doing with this. You put you feel is best. We've made a recommendation there based on what people are used to seeing on the map. But if you have reason to label it differently, go ahead. That this road name field or _RD though has got to be in the format we're displaying. You see how to do an interstate, how to 56 business, 56 alternate. And I actually put US 81Y because that's the only one in the state, according to KDOT's database. The Y identifier is on US 81, so I just went ahead and showed him how to do that. They're unique. It's in Kansas, I don't remember exactly where. But that road name for the highways will be eventually used to be able to track that road as it moves across the state within our data. Example here, and I realized yesterday as I was showing it to Mr. Bennett, that you have to read the text closely to understand what I'm doing, so I'm just going to kind of run through it with you. Right here on segment 201, we actually as HWY 77. So, both US 77 and U 56 business. It's both. It's coming. At the intersection, U-77 continues on, and Business 56 jumps up into TAM. So done below, if you these top couple, which are just sort of sample throw-ins there, is segment 201 has an entry for 77. It has an entry for U-56 business. That's an entry for both of those because it's both of highways. Segment 2 has an entry for US 77, and segment 203 has an entry for US 56 business. 70 is also US 40 or US 24. There are a lot of roads in your jurisdiction that have two legal names, a whole lot of highways. And this is how it needs to be attributed. You will see when you go in and look at it that there are also alias from twos. That those coincident geometry things that we were talking about earlier. They don't need to be filled out. All that has to be filled out here is, I think, the steward, who did it when, the ID number, and this stuff. That makes sense to everybody. Does anybody have any questions about how that works?
Yeah, well, I normally don't have a
Good. Kyle from KDOT has a question.
I don't have a question, I just wanted to point out that the way we do it is we have primary routes, and we have a hierarchy level of interstate, and then bus route, and then K route.
I would, but we have
The lowest number, becomes the primary system.
Yeah, you can't be in a room with
So in this case, if it's Highway 77, and if K-19 was riding on Highway 77, if that's US 77, then US 77 is the primary route, K-19 is the rider route. And questions about that, I'm the person probably to contact, because I know where all the rider routes and the state highways, primary routes are.
So the front is the lower number?
Yes.
I know for our county, we have a couple of really tiny highways. This is something to keep in mind as well. You may have in your jurisdiction or your clients may have. We have a couple that are less than, I think they're less than 500 feet. They're pieces that's over, I think, from old routes. Yeah. So if you're concerned about it, or you think that you maybe not are aware of all of them, KDOT does have the data that they can tell you what's in the county, what's available, where it's at. Sorry to speak for you. Yes, sir.
Well, ID, that's the unique ID, right?
That is the unique ID in the road center line. If you back up right quick and take the table itself. Sorry for giving most. The unique identifier for this particular table is alias ID. That's the identifier for this entry. But every one of them will also have a segment ID saying which road segment in that center line file it applies to.
So how can you control the lower number?
Oh, he's talking about the highway number, like Highway 77, Highway 14, Highway whatever.
Okay.
Like the example I give is actually south end of our county, 5677. You say because 56 is the primary and 77 is the rider, right? I am picking this up. So, everything in here has the same features as the centerline file, with the exception of the word alias in front of them. Again, we're asking for a label field, but you label it. We've made a recommendation that it be K-15 or whatever. You label it in the way best for you, with our recommendation in mind, if that's what you prefer to do. So. Now we go to I have a couple of slides for that. Let me pop back up here and go back to the beginning. I just talked about you can keep anything you want, but we have to have the state and federal highways. So at points. these are structures or significant sites with an assigned street address. It is 1 point per occupancy, that is apartment, lot, store, campsite. If it is an apartment building, that is 1 point per residence. If it is a church, it is 1 point per lot. Occupied, you don't have to put points on the others, I would assume. We have in there, we have, you know, finding the campground sometimes is very easy. Finding the campsite is very, very hard. You have a listing, or can produce a listing of the numbers of the campsite. That's a great point to put it. And we get to the point that a lot of people are about, which is that the point must be on the structure or site it represents. I will look at what I mean by that second piece. Remember to keep call routing in mind. It is call routing that is the reason that I'm doing this. I'm going to use this illustration to explain it. What here is actually on the border of Gary County. But you have a house and you have a driveway that is in another jurisdiction. This is about where you assign to the address. It's not about how you get a fire truck or a police car to your house. It's about what phone rings when they dial 911. It's really hard for us sometimes, especially those of us who have worked closely with 911, to understand that these are two different functions. If that point here, County A's 911 phone is going to ring. If you put here, County B's 911 phone is going to ring. It's important to understand that while, yes, it'd be really, really helpful to know where that driveway is, and that point would be really helpful there for routing a responder, that the purpose of the database, the primary purpose of the database, is to get that call to the right place in the first place. So, because of that you put the point on the structure. Other benefits to this, not the least of which is that means that our address points have other value. They represent the places that we have buildings that people may be in that can be used for emergency management, for planning, for mitigation, all kinds of stuff. But the primary thing is the question of call routing. Now, rural county, there are a lot of them out there. Sometimes even in the most metropolitan of counties, they have this issue where if you point here and they're trying to route to that location, they find it. The access is way too far away from there. What I've included as a recommendation, but not a requirement, is they have 2 points. This one as primary, this one as access. Now we can cut those primary points out, do routing on those appropriately. But the access points are still present on those properties that you feel it is a danger to try and route somebody to the middle of that field, behind those trees, or alongside of that lake, or whatever. Again, it's a recommendation that you do this. It is not a requirement, but we certainly understand the need for the recommendation. Why did we come to this choice? I've explained some of the reasons why we think it's a good idea, but here is the dilemma we faced as we started. A survey was done of all of the PSAPs, and we asked them, where are your address points? First, put them on the structure, about a first put them on the driveway, and about a random choice of whether they were urban, structure, rural driveway, some other thing, I don't know. It came to, we were going to tick off half the people in the state, and we're going to make half of the data stewards in the state their address points, no matter what decision we make. So we did for utility, consistency, and strong, functional, accurate call routing, and that is putting the point on the house. That makes sense?
Yeah. Would it be more consistent and more accurate if the standard was the structure and the driveway?
Yeah, it would also be much more expensive.
Yeah. It's gonna be expensive.
Is that fair?
It's gonna be expensive for one half, I guess, but.
Yeah. We own agencies that actually already keep both points, or at least two
I mean,
toward that, so.
I know that most of it in the past, NG911 wise, when we were doing that, only client we worked with wanted all rural addresses on the driveway.
Right.
I know for a fact that, you know, we're gonna be moving, we're gonna get for this.
Right.
And to me, instead of moving the point from the driveway, it makes more sense to make it be other. But Marion, yeah. I think in the end, that's gonna probably be for those that we do.
I agree.
And as far as time, it's gonna be the same.
What we cannot do, what you need to make, you're preparing your bids, as you're considering, what we cannot do is pay you to create 2 points and deal with it. So,
Well, for copying a point and moving, it's the same as moving the point.
I understand. I'm just saying, that's all that we have coming out of this.
Well, okay. I mean, I'm saying that we're cutting the point and moving it, the same as just moving the point.
If it already exists and it's an active point, and you wanna duplicate that point and place it on the structure, I think that's fine.
So,
Yeah.
okay, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean, if
Because there's gonna be time, it's the same amount of
Yeah.
time, just move the point, or
yeah,
copy it and move it.
yeah, I think what Sherry's getting at, if we're working in a community, maybe that doesn't already have
Okay,
that,
the address points, yeah.
creating both.
You just have to,
Well, yeah, okay.
Yes,
Sure.
you have to take the time to attribute, that's the only thing.
Yeah.
yes, ma'am.
So I am in this situation and I am County B.
Right.
So County A had my address point,
Excellent question, and I was about
and
to
they
say
do
that.
not have the street center line because it's in my authoritative boundary.
Right. This is what I was about to hit, and why I used this illustration in particular. There is a point where what I just said isn't true. Technically, there is an interlocal agreement, because this road over here is so far away from any place that can get to this house, that the two have already made an agreement that this 911 center gets that phone call. It's happening. So if that is the case, in order to get that call, it has to be in this county's authoritative boundary layer. That means that the county is going to have that point. You're not allowed to maintain it, and it's going to have to be in here. Our guidance is they put close relatively to the county boundary, and they put it on the access road. As to the structure as they can and still be in their area.
Sherry, can I give you an example in Johnson County?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, instead of County A and County B, let's go to State A and State B.
Yeah.
We have a large Arabian horse farm off Kenneth Road.
Mhm.
Kenneth Road sits a quarter mile west of state line. The property owner owns property both sides of the state line. A small house is closer to the road than Johnson County. We've got the address points there. He has that long half-mile driveway where his primary residence is. Addressed off Kenneth Road, however, it's in unincorporated Cass County. Because the fire department serves that area, you can't even get to the house without bypassing 2 or 3 of our stations. We're on our way with them. So anytime there's a call at the main house, on the phone with us, get everybody going. And it's everybody's CAD system, so we know, yeah, it's okay to be going here. But we run into that too.
The big thing to remember with this is the situation Mark was just describing. I don't know if you picked up on what he said. They received the call and called Johnson County to their fire trucks. That means that point has to be in their authoritative boundary. That's how the phone call is going to be determined. So even if you're sending fire trucks over there, the important thing is who should get that initial 911 call. And yes, it shouldn't be in one, there can only be one primary point per address. So if you have one and they have one, but only one of them can be primary, the other one has to be secondary. Make sense, right? So what we've done is we have 3 ways you can flag a point. The primary point, you have the secondary access point, which is a point for access, and then you have secondary other. That is, in this situation, for example, if the primary point is going to be in County B, if the primary point is going to sit right here, Maybe you, as County A, is an address point for that house, because it's yours, you're gonna tax it, you're gonna do all kinds of things with it, but yours is secondary other. Make sense? I can just almost agree that's the case. So,
What field is it that indicates what's primary or?
it is called loc type. It's towards the end of the list, and it is the point location type. It is a mandatory field, and if you're only keeping one point, they're obviously all gonna be primary, but we still ask for them to be on the structure.
Part of apartment complexes, you have a primary, you have an office for that complex.
Right.
Do you classify that different than a unit for that?
All of those are primary points, and we sort of knew going into this that doing the primary secondary thing was gonna make people think, oh, well, you know, the building of an apartment is primary and all the rest are secondary. They're all primary addresses. Let me scroll here in the document a little bit, page down in the document. And we have an example, courtesy of Mark, courtesy of Mark in Tennessee, I think, a couple of them are from Tennessee as well, of how to put this. In a duplex, it's pretty easy. One building, 2 addresses, you're fine. So to get to an apartment complex, you need a point for every unit, approximately in the same place that unit is. And we know it's not gonna be perfect, and we're not asking people to go out and GS the edges of an apartment or anything. But approximately in that spot. We recommend, not require, but recommend that you include a point just for the building, because you're gonna have to occasionally send a police officer to the parking lot, to a stairway, something like that isn't in an apartment. For you that have messed with 911 data, I guarantee you, apartment 101 in every apartment building in your jurisdiction looks like the place all felons go to when they prison. Because dispatchers, myself included, when I was doing that, will get first apartment number if that address is not available separately. So this is a courtesy to them and for better bookkeeping, but these are all primary points.
Is there somewhere you say, well,
No. And one of them has a unit number and one of them doesn't. The other example we have here is how to do multi-floors. If you have multiple floors, and the reason this example is in here is to show you it's best to keep the floors sort of grouped in line and to put the points on top of each other. If you ever work GIS, you know you can't grab those points, and again, you have a pain trying to get them back out. So don't stack them in the same XY. You can put them as close together as you'd like, but separate them out enough that they can be grabbed and looked at and labeled. But all an example here of that question that you just had, Gordon, about the difference between a point for a building and a point for an apartment. They're identical except for the apartment. And notice that point as well. That's all required, and we're asking you to concatenate the whole thing together and make it look nice and put that on all of them.
The comma?
Actually, I don't know that I checked any authority before I put that comment in there. I may have just done it by habit, so, to check and be sure. Can you note that one too? And I'll go back and look. Thank you.
I was thinking it was punctuation.
Label fields won't be used for that, but yeah, I'll check and be sure. I think that's standard, I think.
Okay.
Special locations in here, and these are just some notes for you, basically. You're still gonna do whatever is best for you locally, and if what this says is not best for you locally, we understand that. But if it's a strip mall or something like that, you're gonna want a point for every store, you know. If it's an office building, I don't know about where you work, but it's hard to keep track of who's in what office, even if you're actually in the building. So don't think that you have to assign every suite number and everything of a transient building. This is really more about residences and permanent structures. For the mall, they have huge common areas. They don't just have a parking lot and a little stairwell like an apartment building might, of course. They have huge fairways that people can move through and lots of social area. So it's a really good idea to have that building point and a point for every store. By creating cities and parks, they may not have buildings, but people will call from there and use that location, and they may have phones. So it is important to have, points there. We recommend that you add them. We also recommend that if they have named or numbered sites, like we talked about campsites, parking sites, boat docks, things like that, that you put a point for this as well. In order for call routing to work, each unique address must only be in the system one time. It's just a fundamental thing about it. So in here, in this summary of requirements, I have given you what makes a unique address. It's a combination of all of these fields together. If you change even one of them, you're not duplicating the address. You can have a different one. So we have one case in one jurisdiction from a member of the committee where we have I think it's a fire boundary running down the middle of a building, where one jurisdiction is, the other of the building is in the other jurisdiction. And you can use this location type field that Nina has added to put east half, west half, if you need to, so that you can see two different points with two different ESNs and whatever else you need. But you cannot duplicate. As at 507 Northwest 6, you cannot have two primary 507 Northwest 6. You just can't. So make sure you go through your data and check that. Addressable structures, living units, and occupancies, and every phone service address in the TN listing. Under that, you may not know that's not a building. It can be a phone box. It can be a whole lot of things. So that's why we include that in the list. The address points that should be in your data, every structure, every site, but also everything that is in the telephone number listing. I also question where if they have 10 phones, do you need 10 points? So it is 1 point for every unique address. If they have 10 phones at that address, you just need 1 point for it. Does that make sense? That was taken through pretty quickly.
The team will have multiple entries, won't they, for each phone? They would, wouldn't they?
Yes, they went for every phone number.
Did the schema for the addresses, did you include a spot for like a sub number, like a half?
Let me pop back up here. We have a address number and an address number suffix. If you know address number is a number field, which is an integer, so 22 North Buckeye. If the actual address is 2201 half, the half goes in the suffix field right here.
Okay.
You're welcome.
In some cases, rural areas, garages, houses, look real familiar.
Sure do.
We're gonna probably have to have PSAP involvement maybe, or just pick a building?
I would say in that case, do your best.
Okay.
We are actually in the process right now. Across the hall, if you have any sympathy, and say hi to Ricky Sekulich, our technician. He is right now moving address points. Eyes are bleeding. It's a horrible situation. But we found that same issue. I mean, you can't even say it's a decorated roof. I mean, you can't do that. And there is no data in most places for the house is. The appraisal data is not going to help you pick the house from the aerial. Come as close as you can. You know, if you're building all off by itself with no driveway to it, that's probably not the house.
Right.
Other than that, you know, you're as close as you can get.
Okay.
The real issue here is getting in the right PSAP. It doesn't mean you don't have to care about it in the middle of a jurisdiction, but yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of one of our concerns is, I mean, we were like, okay, some cases you can't tell which one's the house, but that's one that shouldn't be addressed, so that's where I just wanted to be sure. So as long as it's
Yeah, absolutely.
buildings that the driveway leads to.
One of the things that we ran into is several places where we have addresses, and according to the appraisal data, we have houses. I don't see anything from the aerials that any human being should be living in. Like, I don't know where to put that point.
That's,
We were in it.
right, and that's kind of our concern was, if we're supposed to try to find this house, that's gonna be some PSAP involved, which is gonna extend the time.
Absolutely, and this is more of a get it in the living structure issue.
And it can even get worse than that if you've got a farmer who has
Yes.
some single wide trailers on the property that have a separate address because those who are living there, and you know, there's only one parcel address that exists, so you have to try to figure out
Right.
through the 911 database who's living in what trailer and drop the point on the right trailer.
We have A and Bs, we're in 2 houses, 1 driveway, and so we addressed on the driveway so that responders can find it. I mean, that's what most people did, so that their addresses are, you know, 1503 and 1503B. I guarantee you we're wrong. I guarantee you we're putting those points on the opposite house. But we're doing the best we can, and we're as close as we have to be for this, so.
And the A is address number Suffolk.
That is the address number for Suffolk. A, 1/2, west, east, some people use weird things, but if it's on that address number, that's where it goes.
I assume all your dispatchers, that when they get a call, they verify that and
Yes.
make the change.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have to tell you, our county, we didn't have apartments. We don't have apartments set out. We have a single point per building. So this is going to be a big adjustment, not just for us, but for the dispatchers who have been able to type whatever they want in that apartment field for a long time because there wasn't anything real given in our data. As we adjust that, their processes are going to have to change as well. And if you are remediating data and you are outside the 911 process, I encourage you to communicate as much as possible with the 911 center about this, because it's also their life and death planned and procedure-based processes that are going on here. And we try to account for that as much as we could, but some of this is up to local interpretation, and if you think at all they might care, ask. Give them a chance to give an opinion. So, points and road settlements are really the monsters in this project in terms of detail and time. The road really is stable first. We have a type of data, 3 boundary layers. First, the authoritative boundary that we talked about early on. The authoritative boundary is pretty simple. It's just the area in which your data is authoritative. For most of us, it's a county or city boundary. As we spoke about earlier, if you don't have one and you are looking for something to start from and you are a county, I think DAS can provide for you. For city limit boundaries, you could get that out of tax units as well, but I would be cautious to make sure that it is updated. I know those aren't always, those stations and things don't always get updated quite as often. And trust me, as a dispatcher and the person who was handling the maps in dispatch, I found out that there was an annexation when I got chewed out by a deputy because I sent him to someplace that was now in the city. I threw in information in the county, I'm sure a lot of your PSAPs are in the same boat. Yeah.
This is something he was talking about 5 minutes ago, but
All right.
we have, DAS has, and KDOT have dwelling locations, in a point shape file, that you can cut DAS and get those from, I think Kristen knows where they are. So if you're on the driveways and you need to create sort of copying and pasting, maybe it would be quicker to use those points.
Where did they come from?
County maps, KDOT county maps.
Okay.
They're questionable at best, but.
It's interesting if you have nothing to begin with. Yeah.
Yeah, shoot us an email if you're interested in that.
Most of us are only going to have a single authoritative boundary. The cities, of course, can have what are called island annexations, so they may have multiple polygons to worry about. And, you know, if you are to use that for multiple counties, you're going to have multiple polygons most likely to worry about as well. But for most of us, this is going to be a single polygon layer. Let's see. The agent ID, this is kind of up in the air. the ACID, according to Nina, has got to be a registered domain name. I thought, how in the heck are we gonna get 117 registered domain names, and who's gonna pay for that, and who's gonna handle that? And, fortunately, got a better answer than I could have hoped for when I talked to Mr. Min about it. And that was that, we expect whoever provides that LVS and ECRF to do that for you. So, we actually don't have to do it. It's gonna be something that happens at the software level. For REL, we have created a domain name for every jurisdiction, for every PSAP, for you to use. The domain is filled and built. If the software vendor can use it, they will. If they can't, we'll let you know what it changes to, or we will script it to change and send it back to let you know. But just so you're aware, if you do get in the middle of these standards and you, oh my goodness, we haven't registered this domain name, that's not on you. You don't have to deal with that. So, agency service boundaries. These are the polygons that represent the area that police, fire, EMS, and other services respond in. I say that because it's real important to know. I'll show you why in just a minute. But there are a few fields, NINA required fields, that we have left out of this entirely. And that, again, these are fields that are, it's the REL URI, the service URN, and the agency vCard URI. These are fields that are going to get assigned by the software vendor. We're not going to have you worry about them for now. We don't even know if the aggregator is going to add them or if you're going to maintain them eventually. We don't know what that looks like. So they're just not in there. We're ignoring them. According to the NINA standard, there are two ways that you can choose to keep these polygons. I have built a description for you of how those two ways work. One of them is that you can keep multiple emergency service boundary polygon layers. A law enforcement layer, a fire layer, an EMS layer, and then whatever other emergency service layers you care about. Or you can keep it as a combined ESB, where you go with the smallest common polygon, or the largest common polygon, I guess is what that is. But given a description of what that looks like. If this is sheriff's boundary, West Half Department 1, East Half Fire Department 2, North Half MSA, South Half EMSB, then your description makes sense for people. Awesome. So you've seen that. I actually keep my data in that combined fashion. I was very glad to see it will still be supported. If I have an annexation from the city, I only have to change that boundary one time. I don't have to change it in 3 different layers or whatever else. But you choose to keep it that way. Those of us that do that do have an extra step that everybody else doesn't have. There's a type field where you put, this is a law, fire, or EMS layer, or you select combine. And when you select combine, you then must fill the following 3 fields out. When you combine, you must put what is the law enforcement that goes there, what is the fire that goes there, what is the EMS that goes there. You can ignore the fields, you're keeping 3 separate layers. You may want to keep more layers than this. Dickens County has a lot of fire departments. I think we have 11, but we only have 3 rescue units. So ours actually divides, again, past this on when we have rescue trucks. You or your clients may have that same situation. You are absolutely able to build within this grant and to submit for call routing additional layers for that kind of thing. I pointed out last night that some people have rec layers as well. They have areas of their county that one record goes to, areas in another. Welcome to keep that too, either combined or as separate layers. Emergency services, call routing, and in your agency, so you can keep whichever ones of those are necessary for you. Now, here, Gordon asked a question about whether a unique identifier had to be unique in all of your data or just in one data layer. And I said there will be exception, but it's just in that one data layer. This is the exception. If you keep all three, enough, not repeat unique identifier through those three layers. So if you're gonna use something like an automated number or something, you cannot start each of them with one. Most people are probably gonna use some form of name as the unique identifier here. You're not gonna have 75 fire departments. You're gonna have a very small set, and so adding FD is a unique identifier. But whatever you choose to use, understand that it has to be unique when you consider all of these layers together, how many ever of these you make. Polygon layer, and I'm not talking about topology with these for a reason. I will hit it in just a minute. The last polygon layer is the emergency service zone, emergency service number boundary layer. Required in NENA standard, but it is required for the Kansas standard, and the reason for that has a lot to do with the MSAC discussion we had earlier. Should be the same as your police, fire, and EMS layers put together. But if you're anything like me, I'll go ahead and throw myself under the bus. If you're anything like me, changes have happened to that, and because it didn't match you in your dispatch software, you always kept up to date on it. So there could be some editing that needs to happen here, or a different polygon that you have because you're either behind in the editing or things have changed. So this is a layer. For a long though, it's just going to be copying from the three. Okay. So it's up to these three. They have to completely fill your authoritative boundary layer. No overlaps. If you have areas that you are responsible for the addressing on, you also have to be responsible for what fire department goes there, what police department goes there, that kind of thing. Same with the ESN. So that's the topology check for these things. Yeah. If you go to NENA standard, you will find a whole bunch of other recommended layers. Most of these are going to either be handled at aggregation. You all have to keep a state layer. That's just silly. It has no relevance to you. Some of them, like the you don't have to keep a separate counties for all of the counties in Kansas either. You're keeping yours as your authoritative boundary. The municipal boundary, something that probably should be keeping. But not every municipality has a fire department or police department that is unique to them, so not every one of those city limit boundaries is necessary for call routing. That's why we take this layer out and we say, we'll look at that when we're done. We need to get the necessary layers paid for and done all the way across the state first, then we will look at these. The reason municipality boundary layer is not in the main one is because it may be relevant to call routing. We have incorporated towns in Dickinson County. We have 3 that are important to call routing, the other 6 are not. And so going through the legal descriptions and trying to look up annexations and everything that you would have to do to get a good, solid city boundary is not worth the money immediately for call routing.
What's splitting the segments at municipality?
At municipality boundaries, for now, are concerned the ones that are going to show up in your, in your call routing.
That was
Yes.
something we were just talking about, because we thought that was kind of the phase 2.
Right.
We were like, well, let's split them in phase 1.
What we are doing here in Dickinson County, because I have my municipalities, is I'm splitting them now. And if you have them, there you go.
Yeah.
But if you don't have them, the point is...
Only the ones that need to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
The cell phones, sectors, cell sites and cell sectors, and this is an important layer. It's not critical for call routing, and it has been moved to phase 2, so we're going to look at that once we get everything else finished. You'll see lots of lines through stuff. Again, municipality divisions and neighborhoods are not something that we actually have in Kansas, so we're going to, unless somebody tells us otherwise, unless somebody says, oh wait, no, we do have those and we just didn't know, we're gonna remove them from the document entirely. They're just part of what we do in Kansas. So, we get down, is everybody okay to keep going? Does anybody need a break for a minute? Everybody seems to be handling pretty well at this point, taking off when they need to, so we do the specifics of grant-funded remediation. Sure I'm not missing anything as we go through. Okay. Spoke of phase 2, that's the breakdown. What will money pay for in phase 1? This is not necessarily if you're doing your own remediation, what you grant money will pay for. Phase data layers directed for proper placement, topology, and attribution. Any features that need to be created to complete phase 1, to complete the mandatory pieces of phase 1, you can do. Within center lines, that's public roads and addressed private roads. Within the radius table, it is highways, and anything where the PSAP provides you the data. No, if you have been asked to go out and do the research for it, only the highways. Does that make sense? Address point, primary point, you can create that. Anything that is needed in those 3 policies.
As a ask PSAP, if they have anything that they want in the road alias?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no reason not to. It creates more complete data that's helpful in 911 routing, and if they have it available for you and they can say, you know, all of Jeep Road is also Kyle Bridge Road, it should be easy.
But if they don't have it, then it's just...
Right.
Okay.
Have additional fields in there?
No. Whatever additional fields they would like in that data. Ask that they be at the end unless you have some reason for them to be at the beginning or somewhere else, but they can have whatever fields they like. I certainly maintain a lot more than is in here. I don't maintain anywhere near this number, but a lot of the fields I have are going to have to get thrown in because we have business purpose to have them. Other questions? Other questions? Line. That's part of our discussion from yesterday, so I'll just delete it from my slide. It may still be in your document. I did not go back and check. If so, you can cross it off. It will be out of the next one. This has come up a couple of times. Camera correction. The whole reason that you have a report with CAMA on it was to help give you an idea of how complete or incomplete their address point is right now. It's not to say every one of those addresses needs a point, or we consider that CAMA data to be authoritative. For instance, with your visitor's office very often, you know that the situs address is not relevant to their process. It does not do anything with value. So it has a different level of importance depending on the jurisdiction you're in, and thus a different level of accuracy. So you're not correcting CAMA, and you don't have to have a point for every one of those CAMA addresses. This is just to help you get an idea of how complete your address point layer is at this point. You would have a concept of how many points needed to get going in the future. For you, and for some jurisdictions, that test is almost meaningless because the CAMA data is so out of line with the road center line that it's just not helpful. For some of you, it's a very, very accurate test. So for what it's worth, that's why it's there. And for driveways, it is certainly okay for agencies to keep them if they have them and remove them when the data is submitted, or if they keep them in a different layer, but that's not part of what we're going to do with grant funding. Also, a private road does not have any addresses on it. it doesn't get in there either. The second features that slide with that rotated boundary polygon. Whoever's handling the data for that other agency needs to create that feature. Last one is, obviously this is really specific to the vendors, travel and research time for populating attributes or records listed as optional. If that data is handed to you, you cannot spend travel and research time filling those fields out, things like the surface type, things like that. If you have something you can conflate it from and just copy it over, great. They hand it to you in a spreadsheet, you can just upload, great, but not out to go get those, not choppy and things like that. The document itself, a little bit more specific, that in the road center lines, if they do not already exist, you create them within 10 feet or less of the center of the visible road surface using the best available ortho imagery. Some of you have a higher standard that you build to than that, and that is awesome, but this is the one we will accept. Address structures, living units, and occupancies. And a unique address with a landline as found in the TN list from the current 911 database provider, not 1 point per phone line, 1 point per address. Authoritative boundaries. All existing polygons shall be corrected for placement, topology, and attribution. If they don't exist, you can create them. Like we have a starting place that you're welcome to use. If you have another, you're welcome to use that as well. We are really well aware that when we try to put all these counties together, it is not going to fit like a jigsaw puzzle. Segregation is going to be a scary process. So do your due diligence. Do what you think is best, what the county thinks is best, and send it in, and we'll start wrestling with it from there. Service boundaries. They don't exist in the original data. You can create, at a minimum, police, fire, EMS, but if they use others, you can create those as well. It is up to the agency whether you do a single layer that has all of those things cut out in polys, or whether you do a polygon layer for each one. They have a CAD system or something that's dictating that to them most likely. And polygon for every ESD or every ESN in the service area. And of course, talked about the road alias table. If the commonly used road name is reported to you by the PSAP, it's great. Other than that, it's highways. Are there questions about any of that? I just went through a whole bunch of stuff. Does anybody have anything that you didn't feel comfortable at the time or didn't want to say at the time, but now you're going, wow, I don't know why you guys did that? Is there anything you would like to express a concern, opinion, whatever?
Like Pam and I were talking over lunch, once all this data's done, you know, we've reformatted all these to get the remediation complete. Normally when those 911 systems went in, you sent your files off to them, they formatted the map display
Right.
to work with what you have.
Right.
How is that going to affect? Are they going to be keeping old files because it's formatted to work with the dispatch office? Are they going to keeping this new also to keep it ready to gen?
I have to on this one, but I'm thinking it is reasonable for them to request that their vendor reformat to this new state standard, since everybody's going to be using it. It's not like it's going to be unique to them. Can they?
I would think so.
And they can use 911 funds to pay for that, I would think, that their simple 911 funds. And if you're having a problem, if you run, you tell your vendor and they say, well, that'll be $1 million, thank you very much. Then I am sure that the council wants to, assist with that, to try to communicate about that and try to explain to them what we're doing and get that down to a more reasonable location. Am I?
I think you're right on point.
Great, works for me.
Well, they put me up front for anything again, I promise. Anyway, questions, other concerns? Surely looking at this, you can't all be going, oh, this is perfect and great. I mean, you guys have to have something that's just...
Really, though, I mean, you never really have a problem with, this portion of it. And you asked a question about, that we emailed to you about, the MSAG and so on, so, it all looks pretty good.
Awesome.
It all looks pretty good. I mean, you have it stuck very well on here. And, you know, we've never really had a question about your remediation guidance.
Awesome. Thank you very much. If anybody is looking at this and you go, I don't understand what to do in this situation, please be sure to let us know. We can add images, we can add explanations. What I'm about to show you is the template geodatabases that I created for this. If you're not an Esri person, this is not going to make a whole lot of sense to you. But these are available and you're welcome to grab them if they would be of any help to you at all.
I have one more quick one before we move on.
Yeah, please.
This is related to the emergency service boundaries.
Uh-huh.
If they exist already from the AOS report, are we simply correcting the topology, or are we checking to see if the boundaries are actually correct?
This is kind of a tough question, especially as those boundaries move around city limits. It's something that I think is going to come up quite a bit. It needs to be.
Well, I agree.
Yeah. It also.
But I don't think that was ever addressed. I know I had asked that question.
Yes, in an email.
Months ago.
We held off. We received emails from a few people that we held off on until this meeting, and then we're going to issue a written answer to those questions after this. But I don't think you can go without correcting them. Am I out? You know, you have to fix them.
I think they need fixed.
Yeah.
And they need to be checked.
You have to fix them, and
But that means that we have to track down
yes.
the information that goes along with it.
Yes. And hopefully the PSAP is going to be a participant with you on that. And
I've tried it. You know, sometimes it's hard to find.
yeah, absolutely. And sometimes people disagree on it. And like we don't know that too.
Okay. That's good to know though. So yeah.
One of the biggest and most time-consuming things that I have found in my process as I'm trying to do this, and I don't have an error report to go by, so it may be a completely different experience for somebody else, is the requirement to split the cements at the city limit boundaries because of a very simple truth. We have always taken fire district boundaries and whatever in the middle of the road. This middle road done. Where the city limit boundary is.
Right.
Those are a different thing. And you end up with a whole bunch of really tiny segments that are connectors between the street, which is in the city, and intersecting street, which is out in the county, or wherever. And that takes some time, but it is necessary. As you build the data, for the locals that are going to be doing this, as you build the data, you will begin to see that it is absolutely necessary to be able to make appropriate connectivity, to be able to route a call properly as you use this GIS data. So we're aware there's a lot of little hinky things.
In a case like that, do you just do basically no range?
No range.
Segment?
It's,
Okay.
you put the street on it with appropriate ESN, because
Right.
that's what's about to change, is the ESN in the municipality. It's going from Abilene to unincorporated. And then zeros for the range, because it's that long, you know, there's nothing to it. Any place where you either don't have addresses or the thing is too short to meet your address policy, zeros. Aiken County has 50 addresses on each side of every 1 mile road. That's how we did the rural stuff. So by math, you have about a new address every 100 feet. It's a 50-foot segment because the roads are offset where I have a correction at section line or whatever. I'm putting zeros on those. I'm not throwing an address on there just so I have one. That's appropriate. You know, there's a lot of zeros, I promise. Are there lots of zeros? Yeah.
Like, I'm thinking of US 40, Missouri, have actually businesses with addresses in between the directions of travel. I don't have anything like that in Kansas.
Wow, I don't know.
Excuse me, on 87th Street Parkway west.
You have to be different about everything.
West of Renner, yeah, when they reconstructed 87th Street Parkway, they've done that, there's nothing there yet, but we're still trying to figure out how to address those buildings.
It's City Orleans has a couple of places where, I'm gonna say that it was necessarily wealthy or influential people, but it is a small town. We had people that wanted a particular address, and they gave it to them, even if it was on the wrong side of the street. That's just bottom line. So I have a couple of places where I have a little segment, I've had to cut the addresses because they're even as you go down, you know, even one side odd the other as you go down the street, then it stops. And all of a sudden, it's the other option, or it's nothing on one side and only odd on the other. I mean, you're gonna have to play to accommodate this strange addressing that has happened. I absolutely love for someone to come down and tell the cities, and I don't wanna just lump this into the cities, this is the address standard and this is how you will address going forward. It's just not reasonable, it's not gonna happen. So do not try to make the real world fit your model. Make your model fit the real world, even if that means you have to cut lines or do whatever to get that done.
Ottawa has that circumstance, that main road that goes through Ottawa, one
Yeah.
direction of traffic is north and one direction of traffic is south, and that's like Tractor Supply Company sits between the same road.
Yeah.
So Ottawa would be a good example where that occurs.
And they're going to have to segment around that. Another thing, I don't think I can show you, and that we have, it's not gonna be available for you to look at, and I apologize. Another thing that we have is we have a city that addresses where there is no road. They have, let's say that Fifth Street is 3 blocks long, and then the city continues for another 12 blocks after that with a big open area that is a fairground. A building at fairground, they address as though Fifth Street continued that whole 12 blocks. Even though I have no right-of-way, there's no way to drive there. Difficulty with that. And that is one of the reasons, as we discussed all of this, that we decided we're going to go in error, but some errors are okay with the every address point has to hit the center line thing. There is no reason to create a phantom center line to support that. That is an address point that sits out there, and that will fail the geocode. The whole point of having the address point system in there is so that when we call 911, it tests address points first, and then it's not going to go check if there's a valid center line to match it. So that's a pretty rare circumstance, but it does happen occasionally, and we do have to recognize, again, that center lines have many purposes, and we need to accommodate the world as it is and not try to fit it in the other direction. Yes, it is called delusions of grandeur. And yes, I have a Conan geodatabase. I thought I should probably take that off there before somebody asks me what that is, but we'll just move on.
What is that?
My husband plays war games,
Oh.
and I am building the Conan world in a version of ARC that I have at home.
Well, you and Benny would just
There we go.
talk for hours.
There you go. So this is NG911 North. It's a geodatabase. It is, the reason it's North, because it has 3 things in it from this perspective. It has the road alias table out here, a relationship class between the road alias table and the road center line. Just so when you are working with them in ArcMap, you can actually see all those road aliases that are assigned. Make that easy. I know a lot of people don't mess with relationship classes, so I thought I'd put that in there just so it's pre-done for you in case you don't mess with it. And this is the featured data set that has the topology in it for NextGen 911, at least for the data layers we've already started. Featured data who are not familiar have to have a spatial reference. That's why one for Kansas North and one for Kansas South. Here is address points, the authoritative boundary in EB and SD, the runner line. These data layers set up. And automatically assign the Windows login to the FI field and the current date and time UTC to the last update field. The database itself, first update, the database itself is built with all of, oops, didn't go back to the database itself. There. The database itself has got all the domains in it. Also a spreadsheet in case you don't fight with every county in Kansas. You just want to grab some pieces of it, you're welcome to do that. You can come and delete things out of this. The official county name is the county name from the list that NINA requires us to use. The municipality, I explained this in the document where I went and got all these things, but they're in NINA's standard or they're something where we went and found an authoritative source. The point of using these names is that you don't ever have I-B-I-L-E-N-E instead of A-I-L-E-N-E, that you don't have to fight with that data entry problem of basic spelling. The domain in the data set is in here. Fine. Back, I have topology. You are welcome to pull whatever rules out of this you want. You guys can do whatever you want with this. But within the standard, these are all the things we say have to happen. That you, first point past your authoritative boundary, that your center lines cannot overlap, they cannot intersect, they can't self-intersect, blah, 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 blah. If you're either not comfortable building topologies or you just want to know what we meant by all this stuff, here's a place for you to go look. And got it. Oh, she missed one. Please let me know so I can get them in there. There's data in any of these layers. You can load them, do whatever you like with them. I have two and a half. Spreadsheet of all of the domains, which also explains just a little bit where some of them came from and gives you their full definitions so that you can add them. You can either load from the spreadsheet into a geodatabase or whatever you're doing yourself, or you can just have them to look at it and to review. I do want to hit one particular field. I mentioned it in the document, but in everything you will find the place type domain, the thing that is on address points. And if you look at the NINA document right now, it is actually a required field. Changing that. Couple reasons. One, expensive would that be to fill out for every single building? But two, their list is really questionable. They picked a list that actually bicycle is one of the choices for what type of building it was. Underway, so that you could actually be underway and get an address. I'm not really sure how that works with real-time updating, but anyway, this is their list currently. They're hunting for another, but we have a committee that seems to get along pretty well and is happy to debate their issues and end it quickly, but NINA does not seem to have that. They seem to they seem to really be going at it over this stuff, and I found out that a couple of recommendations for changing this have already been made, and they've been down. This is a crud list. And it's so bad that we've actually put the address point, ignore it. You know, it's in NINA is important. NINA says they're going to pull it optional because of their concerns over it, and what we had is an optional field is the KSPID, or the parcel identifier from CAMA. The reason we added that because the CAMA data is something called an LVCS code, which is a code for the use of that structure. Usually when NINA picks a list, that will be our best bet for quickly economically populating whatever list NINA has. So putting the parcel number on each point will allow us to hook back to that CAMA data and hopefully update that stuff a little more easily should that ever happen. Although, like I said, it is up in the air and it may stay optional, and I do not imagine if it stays optional that we are going to put it in the Kansas data model at all until we use that list, because it's just not helpful.
You said, well, pay for optional field.
For your research of optional fields.
we can pick up the camera file and work with it, then it's payable.
And hook it in and populate this field, that's not a problem. You're welcome to do that.
You know, get paid for doing that.
So I, one, would not like to populate that CAMA number because that CAMA number changes, which adds a whole nother maintenance.
Absolutely.
And that's
You hold
also
off?
something you can get at the point by just drilling down through the point in your
Absolutely.
data.
But I was gonna suggest, what we are gonna do is we're not gonna populate it until the time comes. But there are some people that don't have that option. For some people, this is their hurrah with getting their data together. So this is something that the local agency, it's optional, the local agency can decide. But yeah, for those of you that are handling your own data or doing ongoing maintenance, I would hold off on this until we know what the list is, because that is gonna change. So questions about any of that? Uh-huh.
That I think are fantastic, and thank you for putting those together.
Sure.
Like Scott and Scott, we can put those out for download on the DAS website and the next Gen 911 website.
What thing actually is that we could put and the spreadsheet out there. The other thing that I have, and it is still testing, but one of the fields that we included in address points was the U.S. National Grid coordinate. It's very important emergency management. Could become more important to FEMA as time goes on. I have a Python script that if you calculate the X and Y for that address point, which is an optional field, will auto-populate that National Grid coordinate. And I'm happy for anybody to have that. So once I've tested it and made sure that it's not tied straight to, you know, I have everything routed on my computer, I take that toolbox into these template geodatabases, and you're welcome to them. As we go forward, we're probably going to have other things that come up, either because of aggregation or whatever, where we go, okay, this is something everybody's going to have to do. As an output of these tools, we will put them out there for you guys to download and make use of. You don't have to, but we want to be able to give you all the tools we possibly can.
I asked when I was out of the room.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I thought we were gonna be doing away with the north and south, and there's gonna be one coordinate, WGS 84. I thought that's what next gen was.
WGS 84 is the format for next gen, but everybody locally keeps their data in north and south.
Right.
So rather than make the real world conform to our model,
Okay.
we're the aggregator mess with the projection change.
Yeah.
Yep. We want to seamless processes as it possibly can be. If you have local fields you need to keep or whatever, keep them for heaven's sake.
Yeah. Change your.
No, you don't gotta mess with it again. So, we don't know exactly what aggregation looks like yet, but we have some very firm ideas of the things that we know are gonna happen there. I don't know if it's in your guys' version of the document or if I skipped it, but actually, there's a new data aggregation chapter that will be getting filled out as time goes on. It talks about everything that's gonna get added to the table by the data aggregator. That way you should be able to take the document and look back at that MENA standard and see that we have matched everything that they have. When Jerryman looked over this document, he had some really great things to add, and they have been incorporated in the version you have. But the big takeaway that I got from it was that we are on track with what we are doing, that he led us to make a couple of changes that will keep us in line, particularly making everything uppercase. I have like a personal peeve about everything being uppercase. It's always driven me nuts. But actually a technical reason for it, older 911 software doesn't know the difference between upper and lowercase, and so it doesn't know that an uppercase A and a lowercase a might be the same thing. So in here is required to be an uppercase. That's actually in the initial part of the standard now, with the exception of a few fields. That agency, the domain, is going to be lowercase. We have a proper case in the label field, and the I field be whatever case you want. Because I've set these geodatabases up to use the Windows sign-on, that'd be up to your local domain policy. It's not going to have anything to do with your GIS stuff. So if you choose to use this template, you're not going to have control over whether that's upper or lowercase. So there's no reason to require it in that field. It won't be passed along.
document two, just to give Sherry another compliment there, Mark did ask if he could use portions of this document in some of the training that he conducts, so that's he's on the committee. I think it's a good reflection of the quality of this work here, so, and also, as Sherry said, that where NENA finally lands, that this is gonna be right in line with their final standards, whether it's what's supposed to be 12 months ago or is 12 months from now. I don't think we have to worry too much that we're gonna be, too far off from that final standard. I think we're really close.
And if by following this, there's also a level of commitment that's coming down that if you do what we told you to and NENA makes drastic change, we're gonna find a way to convert that data, whether it's provide you a script to do it or do it at aggregation, pass it back to you, whatever. If you go here, just like with that date, if you do what we've asked, handle the conversion to what NENA finally lands on.
And then, the other point is, I think it's for all our here today and be part of the discussion. I think we've already made some changes kind of on the fly, because especially in Region 1, it's still developing, and we're just on the cusp of getting into data aggregation, but your points have really been, your comments have really been important here. So if others, as Sherry has mentioned, let us know, let Sherry know, anybody else that's on the GIS subcommittee here, or talk with Scott, because now's the time, we want to nail all this stuff down in Region 1, because it's a good time to have that discussion while we have the time to be flexible. We don't want to having these now is great. We want to have that while we're in Region 4. Saying maybe tweak the process or change the data model or whatever, and then have to go back. That's when it really gets expensive. Before we get into this work, it's hey, we get way down the process and say, boy, I wish we had done that. Have to go back and change things, and we might not be in a position where we really can. So if you have questions, you go home, and next week if you think of something, by all means, call or email. We're trying to make sure we get it right now, and if that means we, have to push the timeline a week or two or whatever, make sure we nail things down now, then that's what we need to do.
If I didn't say this, mediation vendor, don't start working yet until you have his approved work package, because he won't pay you. I'm just telling you, he won't. The second thing is, I know that some of you at least have been contacted by counties within Region 1. Can I get an idea of how many from each of the vendors? 7 here. Okay.
Big contact.
4. Okay.
Contact by 2.
State for somebody from GeoCom?
GeoCom was called.
Yes, environment, sorry.
That's okay. Have you guys been contacted by any, or how many, agents in Region 1 have contacted you?
Just
Okay.
Contacted all 5, just so you know.
I wasn't counting them.
Okay. I was gonna say, because work personally with at least 3 of them, and want to know what experience the other 2.
To do that?
Right, and for any local agencies on the phone, it is absolutely your call. If you'd like to get multiple bids on this, you're welcome to. Talk whenever you'd like within the list. I point out, I've talked to a couple of local counties who have school GIS people who, after looking at the details of the document, decided that while they certainly had the capability to do this, they may not have the time to do it locally. Here in Dickens County, we are a 2-man shop, and it is hijacking us. So please keep in mind how much work this is, and that there is kind of a time frame for it. I don't think anybody set a hard and fast get done date. The question is not just, am I capable of remediating my own data? It's also, do I have the time to remediate my data and do it with quality?
4 days on completion of Region 1 was November.
As
remediation as in phase third part as well, or
No,
remediation?
just remediation. Phase one back to
Oh,
QA.
okay, okay. And this might,
Not from
Bouncing back.
what's the,
So because QA or
kind of the timeline for the
worked on
remediation?
it, it's a larger problem, I'm sure it can be.
That's
a
what-
timeframe.
What date are we talking
But,
about?
yeah.
basically approved from
Oh,
QA.
for region one.
Yeah, it's,
Boy, I was
I'm
gonna
fairly,
say.
I'm fairly sure they,
Yeah, one
I'm
of those
fairly
things.
sure they submitted by then, nobody's. Busy later, because you're, no matter how slow you are, you're gonna be ahead of the problem. Well, I mean, the reality is the larger counties have a lot to change, and they have a lot of processes that have to change as well to accommodate, and their old view on this is a
And
little
I think
different.
Region Two then follows
Yeah.
probably about a half month later, because we're starting up, you know, we've already started the analysis part of that, so we'll be kind of all of these regions overlap.
Yeah, the gap analysis for Region Two will be delivered on the 14th of May. That's only 2 weeks from now.
It's, so, just to make a note to everybody, if you know someone else that you think needs to see this particular roadshow, we are now going to do this meeting at every kickoff. So kickoff for Region 3, kickoff for Region 4, unless the room is empty, I'm gonna be sitting going through this document again. It'll newest version. If you're doing that very close to your office and you wanna come again, please feel free to. But we're gonna have the same discussion and go over everything as it stands at that moment. There's some suggestion that there may be a new NINA document soon. If that's the case, we'll be adjusting a little bit as we go, and we'll certainly notify everyone. But I just know that this was not your one shot to do this ever. It's your one shot to do it in time with the Region 1 remediation.
You mentioned that we will be receiving a new full MSAG report.
Yes,
What is the estimation on that?
there isn't one yet.
So,
what
since
is-
ours have to be in by May 9th, if we're gonna have a vendor?
Scott? We have a question on point for you. Because we are waiting and we don't have a specific timeline for the new MSAG error report, what about the people who have been told that they need to have a decision whether they're going with a vendor by May 9th? Do they have an extension to
Yeah,
wait?
we're pushing that back as well.
Okay,
Basically, as far as we have to, we'll see
right.
how fast we're gonna be able to get the MSAG reports, and then we'll adjust accordingly.
We'll be quick, but we don't wanna promise and commit dates until we're sure.
I guess vendors, though, we are officially free to do the bid and proposal. For the
That is
baseline.
not my
We're
echelon.
free, go, you can do it.
I think so.
Just making sure. Want to double check.
Yeah.
Because we're keeping the
Well, they'll
MSAG.
If you wanna, if you wanna hang off until you see the
They
new
can
MSAG
reflect
reports,
inside.
yeah,
They
you
can
can,
do everything.
Okay, we admit everything but the MSAG, everything but the MSAG.
If you have a question that has not been answered and you think of it later, please feel free to contact us. If you have anything that you think needs to be in this document, please and let me know that, just on a napkin or however, as complete and as thorough as this can be is what we want. We want this to be the best roadmap that it can be for no matter what their skill, no matter what their understanding, to be able to know what we're trying to do with this. So it's also going to be the foundation on which we're building this entire program, including the future training and everything else. So the more we can get in here that is relevant and helpful, the better. So. Great. We are even on time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
For those of you in the meeting, if you have your email address on that sign-in sheet and you want me to email you something post haste, like this model or something, let me know. Otherwise, we will have it available at desk and also at the coordinated website for you to download along with the spreadsheets and everything else. You want PowerPoint? I'll stick that out there too.
So we'll get a notification once that's available. Okay.
Everyone on, thank you very much for listening.